I try to teach my kids as well to like, I'm like, hey, like set a really high goal. And it's like, it's better to set a really high goal and not achieve that goal than to set a really low goal and not achieve that goal. I'd rather fall short of something really huge than something that's a little bit mediocre, right? But dealing with that emotionally is hard, right? So you kind of have to allow yourself. That's the biggest thing that I've learned too, and I'm still kind of learning, is allowing yourself to be submersed in that feeling at that moment and accept it. Just be like, you know what? Like, I failed. I achieved. I was working so hard for this goal and I'm feeling sad. Feel sad, dude. Cry. Let it out. Allow yourself to feel that feeling, because then you'll start to understand that feeling a little bit better, right? So, like the girl that went to state, right? She went to state, and like she knows she could have done better. She knows she could have won some matches that she shouldn't have lost, but she wasn't mentally there because it was on the big stage. There's hundreds of people. You're in this giant stadium, right? It's so loud. They have 10 mats on the floor. You're in this giant arena in Bakersfield. It's the only thing anyone's been talking about all year, you know. And then, you know, she's very sad, and you can tell she wants to cry, but she doesn't want to cry because it's like, I can't let people see me this way, you know. And I like stopped her, and I was like, hey, it's okay. You went out there. You did what you could do at that moment. Allow yourself to feel this right now.
That's awesome.
I was like, how do you feel right now? You know, I was like, you don't have to tell me how you feel. Just think about it to yourself. Like, how do you feel right now? Remember this feeling, all right? Remember this feeling. Allow yourself to go home. Feel it for a few days, right? That's okay. Be submerged in that feeling. Because when's the next time you're actually going to really feel this deeply about something, right? So feel it.
As a youth, I didn't have the mentality for skateboarding or wrestling, but I still come back to both as a 40-year-old adult, even if only to throw up a YouTube and binge some wrestling drills or skate videos. Yet, for those who stick to it, what keeps them coming back? Taking falls on the pavement or potentially snapping a limb while bowling down a skateboard never appealed to me. The tough grind of wrestling that comes with servings of cauliflower ear and ringworm was enough to repel me off the mat after barely a couple of weeks of wrestling practice. I couldn't see past the negative aspects of many things during that part of my life, and when I reflect on those missed chances for growth, I now see what I missed back then. The willingness to embrace the impermanence of pain, the impermanence of fear. I lacked the foresight to see that embracing temporary discomfort in the present can lead to an enduring sense of mental and physical resilience. Martin Jay Ruiz is someone that found his way on a skateboard and later onto the wrestling mat as a troubled youth. At an early age, he found the blank canvases of the skate deck and the wrestling mat to be the wide open spaces that allowed his soul the room for infinite expansion. To this day, his heart never lost its passion for the two mediums. He came from the streets of Santa Maria, California, and was pulled to the magnetic energy of San Francisco, which is a pilgrimage for skaters because of its steep, long concrete hills that can send one bombing down a dance between weightlessness and death.
You just zoom down, and as you're going down, you get this weightlessness. You hit your top speed, and you get to a point to where it almost feels effortless, where it's like, yes, you're like clenching, you're holding, you're gripping as you're going down, but even though you're going so fast, it all slows down.
Greetings and welcome to the Quake City Portal. Martin and I worked together at a moving company here in San Francisco. During that time, we became good friends and kept in touch over the years. Throughout the years I've known him, I've seen him overcome catastrophic injuries and bounce back from them and do many great things with his talents. As a former collegiate wrestler for SF State, he became the wrestling coach for Lowell High School, one of the most prestigious public high schools in the United States. Under his tutelage, he's coached both boys and girls to multiple state championships. Martin also coaches wrestling to adults at Fight Culture Gym in Daly City. He earned his blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and is still an active competitor at 33. Martin has a unique story worth hearing out. I had so much fun talking to him. You'll hear about the mentality it takes to be driven enough to be able to fall in love with mediums like skating and wrestling. You'll hear him share in detail his relentless approach, not only towards his goals, but even more so towards his shortcomings and setbacks. I hope you all enjoy this heartfelt, inspiring, wide open, and spirited conversation with my good friend, Martin Jay Ruiz. So, just to give a little context, you and I met at the moving company.
Yes.
Moving people around San Francisco. And I left before you left. And I heard through other people, there's a story about, we work with a wide range of folks, really smart, bright folks to, not saying that these people aren't bright folks, but they're the ex-cons of society.
Yeah.
They're like ex-murderers or people that have been put away for a long time.
Yeah.
And I heard this story about how you were backed up into a truck.
Yeah.
From other people except you. All right?
Yes.
So, tell me about how that situation and who it was and
Yeah, it was this guy from like Kentucky. He was like fresh out of like prison, and like he had started working there, and like something already had like kind of seemed off about him because he would get into the yard and like first thing you just see him doing push-ups, and he's like very stern and like tough looking guy, right?
I heard he was an ex-Marine.
Yeah, ex-Marine. So he had went to prison because he was out. I don't know where they were exactly, but I guess he ended up getting like a prostitute or something, and it turned out to be a man, and he flipped out about it. Yeah, and he like tracked this person down and ended up murdering him, right? And I was like, okay. I was like, well, that's his past. I'm not going to fret on it. Like, I'll get to know who he is now. And I'm a young guy. At the time, I was way younger. And I was the lead. Like, I'm driving the truck. I'm the lead. And, like, he didn't like the fact that I was younger than him and, like, having to tell him what to do. And it wasn't really, like, a big incident. We were moving stuff into these people's apartment, and he was using a dolly. And he kept on pulling it into their front door, but their front door had a step.
Right.
And it's a brand new place. They're just moving in, and he's chipping away the paint on their house. And I'm just like, we get to the truck, or we get outside, and I'm like, hey, do you mind just being careful with the dolly because you're kind of chipping the paint? And he didn't say anything then because the client was right there. We end up getting back to the truck, and we start loading more stuff, and he corners me in the back of the truck. And I'm like, oh shit. And he's like, hey, tell me what to do. Like, you're not my boss, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey man, like, it's cool, bro. And then right then he's like, I'm not your fucking bro. Started yelling at me. And I'm like, it's cool, dude. Like, I'm just saying, just be a little cautious of what you're doing, And he's like, don't tell me what to fucking do. I'll fucking hurt you. Like, you don't know who I am.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. And then I end up going out of the truck, and then he pulls me back aside, right, and starts yelling like, and you better not tell my fucking boss about this. You better not say anything, or else I will hurt you. I will literally hurt you. And the whole time, we have utilities, right? We have utility belt. We have stuff we use for like packing stuff up, wrapping the couches, right? So I have a blade on me to cut off the saran wrap. So I'm sitting there holding my blade the whole time, like freaking out. I'm like, this guy's going to attack me. I have nowhere to go. I'm like in the back of this truck, right? And he's at the open end of it. And I'm just sitting there. This guy's twice my size. The other person that's working with us there is this freshman in college. And I'm like, great, dude. Like, I got to figure out what to do. I don't know what to do here. Had my hand on my blade. And then he kind of just like walked away. I was like, all right, he's moving. He's over it, whatever. Yeah. I started flipping out. And we had 2 jobs that day. This is the first job. I was like, shit. I still have to do another job with this guy. And we were almost done and everything. I tell the young kid to get in the truck. I hop into the truck, and I call my boss, and I'm like, hey, this dude's flipping out. He threatened my life. Like, I know that he'll do something to me. And I was about to just leave him there in like Palo Alto and take off in the truck. And I was like, I should probably just leave this guy, call my boss to take up and go. And then, but I was like, you know what? Like, let me just chill. And then he gets in the truck, doesn't really say anything. We go finish the other job. but something changed. I think it hit him that he realized like he messed up, because then we get to the second job and like he's doing what I ask of him and he doesn't really say anything. A couple days later, my boss said something to him, right? And he comes up to me and starts apologizing, and he's like, "Hey, I'm so sorry. You know, like you're a very smart kid, and I know I can learn a lot from you, but it's still like it just seemed off. Like you can see in his eyes that like it was this peering look of like there was nothing in there. It was like very scary and daunting to like look into his eyes of someone. It almost seemed like he didn't have a soul, you know. And you're just like, this guy is scary, and like." This dude's working out. He's doing push-ups. He's huge, you know. So, like, I didn't want to work with him the entire time. So then I would wait for him to, like, leave first because I was afraid he's going to, like, follow me home and track me down and find out where I live. Because, I mean, if he can find someone and track them down in a completely another country where he doesn't even know that person, you know, I was like, this guy can track me down here.
Yeah.
So it was very scary. There's a little more to the altercation where like he just didn't like me calling him like bro and telling him to be like, yo, just chill. You know, he didn't want me to like be that. He got very agitated and when I tried to like diffuse the system a little bit.
How old was he? Because I think I met him towards the tail end.
He was like in his 50s, I think.
He was in his 50s.
Yeah.
So
because he was in prison for at least 25 years. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Talk about that. I mean, gets out of jail. He has to work a job he probably doesn't want to do. And then he meets somebody younger than him, calling him bro, and as you know.
Yeah, and calling the shots, right? I'm calling the shots, right? And at the time, I'm like fresh out of college, right? So I'm still fairly young, and to him, like, and I still got a baby face, right? I'm about to turn 33, and I still look relatively young.
Yeah,
and like to him, he probably saw me as like a child, you know, being how old he was.
Wow. So did you know what happened to him afterwards,
I do.
right? Oh, geez.
I do.
Oh, my God. You heard about... Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Talk about what he did afterwards.
So he ends up going back to Kentucky. Well, I don't know if I know the full exact story, but he ends up going back to Kentucky, right? Moves back there because he has, like, friends, family, stuff there or whatever. He had a really good friend that was working at the moving company as well. And then so that's kind of where I got my information from. But he ended up moving back to Kentucky. Don't know exactly what happened. Turns out he ends up murdering someone there, right? And in my head, when I hear that story, I'm like, dude, that could have been me. Like, that totally could have been me. Like, if I would have pushed one more button to him or something, like, that could have been me.
He could have flipped.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, when you talk about how you saw something exit in his eyes.
Yeah.
Right? Just a void entered his, or you talk about absence of a soul.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people have seen that kind of behavior in a human being.
No.
Prior to that, had you seen that in a human being? Like even on the wrestling mat or something?
I mean, you see it every once in a while in like a sport like wrestling, right? Or MMA or jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, where someone like flips their mindset, they become someone else, right? Because sometimes in order to achieve a goal, such as in MMA or wrestling, you have to have that alter ego to be able to flip into, right? Because sometimes you can't see yourself being that type of person, but when you're like on the mat, you're like, you know, all right, I gotta flip it out. This is who I am now at this time. And to see that, like I've seen that because I grew up in like a very bad neighborhood when I was young, and like there's gangs and stuff like that, and like I was picked on and bullied when I was younger, and you could see like those type of people where it's like they really have nothing else going for them, and when you get onto that bad side, it's just like tunnel vision for them, and they're like, you know what, this is it, you're on my bad side, like I'm after you now. And like when I seen that, good thing I was a college wrestler, right? And I was just like, you know what? If I have to, I'm pretty sure I can handle this guy. You know, and I planned it all out in my head. I like everything, planned it all out. I'm like, all right, I'm in the middle of this truck. I'm in the back of the truck. All right, if he comes at me, I was like, I can't reach for my blade first. I'm gonna attack a single leg on him, and I'm gonna dump him to the mat or to the ground so I can get his back. Once I get his back, I can just hold him in a choke with one hand, and I can take off my utility belt with my other hand if I had to.
Right.
I thought that far ahead. I was like, you know what? If I have to kill someone for my life, I will do it.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
You can. And that's what's so beautiful about practicing combat sports is I know what I was like before I studied jiu-jitsu, right? And I was, the fear never leaves you, of course, but how to process these things in your mind. Like you can get from point A to point Z, right? Like you just described, and somebody who's untrained probably just has the fear and the unknown, right? Maybe all they know. I mean, how are you going to dodge somebody at the back of a truck? And it's the big truck, I'm assuming, right?
No, it was the small truck. It was so there's different trucks, right? We have a 24-footer truck, which is huge and long. It's a little bit wider, so you have a little bit more space, maybe to run away or something, right? In the tiny like 13-foot truck, small. It's like it's confined. Like you have like maybe 4 feet of space to wiggle around. Plus, you have all the stuff of the person's home in there. You have boxes and furniture and stuff. So there's no way around it. You're literally just stuck in that truck. Yeah.
How filled was it at this point?
It was like halfway filled.
Halfway filled.
Yeah.
Oh shit! So there wasn't really much wiggle room for you to juke around them or circle around them.
Not at all. There's no way around him. It was like if there was an altercation, I was gonna have to go through him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he got up in your face.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was like he was literally maybe like half a foot from my face, like just right there. Look, and he's a little taller than me, so he's looking down on me. Right.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Damn. What do you think you? Because I look back on our time at the moving company, and if I had been maybe 10 years younger, that could have easily, I mean, it easily is now one of my most favorite jobs in the world. I mean,
yeah,
it's funny to say because when I was younger, I would have never pictured myself working for a moving company and hauling shit around for people, you know. And man, I just look back on you know, even jobs that we've been on together, and it was some good times, man. Even some really good conversations with folks. People who are like really bright, but they just don't want to, you know, not the 9-to-5 job isn't for everybody, right?
Exactly.
Working behind a desk isn't for everybody. And we got to see intimate pictures of how people live.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I don't know. To me, that was fun. How about,
it was awesome. I loved it because like you're moving, you know, anyone from where it's like a college student or someone that just lives alone in this small, tiny San Francisco apartment to like these expensive high rises downtown where it's like multi-million-dollar housing where it's like, oh wow, I could never afford living in this place, right? And you're inside their apartment, you're talking to them, you see how they live their lives, how they go about day to day, you see the type of stuff that people have in their homes, which is the most interesting thing, I think, right? Because you can be like, oh, it's interesting, this is what they're into, this is what they collect, you know, this is how they live in their home. And you can kind of see their personalities based off of what's inside their home. Yeah. Which is pretty cool.
What did you learn most by observing people in that state of transition, you think?
Well, it's interesting. Well, there's two different spectrums. It's like, all right, you have the people that are like so laid back and like so chill that they're just kind of like, yeah, we got whatever you need. I got you. Move my stuff. I don't care how you do it. To like the people that are like really nitpicky and controlling and demanding, and they're like, you have to do everything their way.
Oh my gosh.
So then it's like the job goes a lot slower, right? And then they also usually those are the ones that usually get upset about like the price and the time frame and everything. So it's like you really get to dive into how people are feeling intrinsically with themselves, right? Which is probably the biggest thing that I took away is like you really get to learn about people and who they are when you're dealing with their personal stuff. Yeah. And you have to like move it around, and because like I've worked in offices and jobs like that, and like everyone's fake there, and it's like you don't really get to know who they really are, right? Until you're like inside their home touching their stuff.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, what a way to look at that. Yeah. And I remember one job, we were moving a guy out of his home, and we're moving enough stuff, and you start to see, oh shit, it's just the guy's stuff. And I don't know if we were on that job together. And then after we moved all his stuff out of the house, we go to another spot where it's like, okay, we're maybe in Palo Alto, and then we drive into the city where it's just a spot just for him, and it's like, whoa, he has like a TV, he has a whole nother wardrobe, less furniture, and then we're moving him out of that place, and the guys and I are talking, and we're like, oh shit, I think this guy just got a divorce. Yeah. And we're moving him out of his like secret secret player spot. Pad. Yeah. So I just thought that was so interesting how You're right. You're right. You do get a sense of a real person when you're touching their things.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's not normal. You don't invite. Yeah, you might invite friends. You might invite family over, and hey, invite them. Look at this. Check this out. But you have people moving your shit, and they have no emotional connection to your shit, and I hadn't thought about that in a long time. And you do get those people, and it's frightening, especially when you're lifting heavy shit.
Yeah.
But I always thought it mixed well with, active lifestyles, people that like to people watch, which it seems like most of us most good people on the cruise were. But yeah, that I was just like, I've always wanted to have an episode just of reliving these kinds of things, but maybe we could save that for another time.
Because it's interesting especially if you're packing their stuff and you're like, all right, now I got to go inside all of their drawers and like pack their clothes and their dishes, and you start like finding stuff that's like some weird odds and ends, some I probably shouldn't mention, and you kind of get to see, like stuff they're hiding, because you find stuff, or like you find money, or you find like dildos and toys,
used condoms,
and like all this interesting stuff, and you really get to understand like how dirty people really are,
dude. Right. So it made me look at my own life, and I was like, man, I gotta get rid of shit. There's just a lot of people stuffed useless, forgotten things into their drawers, and that's one of the most common things, if you remember too, is that people say, oh my God, I didn't know I had so much stuff.
Yeah.
And that's unanimous.
Yep.
Unanimous. And so that's what was interesting, was just people own a lot of shit.
That's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I got from it, because now I started looking at all the stuff I have, and now I'm very minimal. I try not to have a lot of stuff. So if it starts cluttering, I'm like, all right, let's get rid of it.
Get rid of it. Yeah.
Let's get it out of there.
Yeah. So yeah, man. Since then, I mean, I followed you on social media, and you've been through a lot, man, since that time.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Injuries.
2 injuries.
Two injuries. Oh, shit. 2 injuries. You're coaching now. Jiu-Jitsu blue belt. On top of being a fucking, lifetime collegiate wrestler. But yeah, talk about, the injuries, and getting over those things.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's funny how, and I think all stems, like, wrestling draws me back in all the time, right? For some reason, wrestling draws me back in all the time, and it all started back in high school, which we'll get back into talking about that.
Yeah,
but
I'd love to, yeah.
So skateboarding is a big passion of mine, right? I've skateboarded my entire life, and that was my outlet of like my parents weren't around too much, right? My mom worked 2 jobs, so she was always working. She was hardly there.
Where did you grow up?
Santa Maria, California.
Santa Maria.
So close to like San Luis Obispo, in between San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara. Small farm town. Like, my high school was surrounded by strawberry fields.
Oh shit.
Like, you walk out, strawberry fields. That's it. There's nothing there. You go down the 101. Now it's a lot bigger and it's nicer, which is cool, which I like to see. But like when I was there, it was very small. You drive down the 101, you pass it in a second. You didn't even know you passed my hometown.
All right,
you know
right.
What I mean?
Okay.
Like, you're like, okay, like I think something's there, but I don't know. Like, keep driving. I'm going to Santa Barbara. I'm going to LA or something. All right. But yeah, there's nothing to do there, right? So it's like I would skateboard. That was my outlet. So my mom worked 2 jobs. My dad broke his back when I was very, very young, right? Broke his back. He's ended up having like five surgeries on his back and stuff. So my dad's been kind of like a homebody, and he didn't like taking pills and stuff like that for his aches and pains. So he would smoke. He would smoke weed and stuff. So my dad was like high all the time. So it was kind of like me. So I have an older brother. I'm the middle child, and I have a younger brother. So we kind of like had freedom to do whatever. We ran our lives. Like I raised myself, basically. My older brother kind of helped raise us and stuff. But like, we kind of were on our own most of the time. So it was like, all right, figure it out. Figure it out. My mom would support me through anything, but it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to hold your hand, teach you how to do this and show you that. It was like, figure it out.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. So skateboarding was my outlet. Skateboarded my entire life. Ended up getting into wrestling in high school. But before we start talking about all the wrestling stuff, so I got injured skateboarding, of course. I got out of college, finished my wrestling career, my college career, and I was like, you know what? I haven't skateboarded in a while. I love skateboarding. That was my outlet. You know, I don't really have wrestling right now. Let's skateboard, you know. Start skating, and I'm like, dude, I'm still pretty good. I used to be sponsored by like the local skate shop and all that stuff, and get free boards, but I was never like the best. But it was like, it was fun.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, let's skate. End up going to Pacifica Skate Park, and I broke my ankle, right? And this was during the time that I was actually at the moving company. So we're working at the moving company, and I go skateboarding, break my ankle, dropping into. You know what a boneless is?
The what?
A boneless?
A boneless, no.
So it's like, so you have your skateboard, right? You take your front foot off and you plant it down while your back foot pops the tail of the skateboard up, and you catch the board with your back hand, right? And you do like this huge stiffy, you kick your leg out. It looks pretty cool and stylish, like the old school Bone Brigade people used to do it, you know? So I did that, but I did it into the pool. So I was jumping outside of the pool into the pool, end up doing like a baseball slide into the pool. My ankle, like my toe, catches the top, and it tweaks back.
Oh,
and
shit.
I hear a pop. And it's like,
oh, damn.
Boom. I'm like, oh, no. And I'm pretty tough with pain. So, like, I was like, oh, fuck. And then, like, I'm like, yo, I think I broke my leg. And, like, all my friends are like, stop goofing around, dude. Get out of the bowl. You're in the way. And I scoot my butt around, and my ankle is just dangling off of my foot, right? And they're like, oh, shit, he's serious. And we're in Pacifica. There's not a lot of people around. And two of my buddies, they couldn't carry me out of the pool. So they had to run to the street, find these two random guys to, like, help pick me up out of the pool. And it's funny, the two guys were like, man, this happens all the time. This happens all the time here.
Whoa, no shit.
I was like, understandable, because you're right across the street from the beach and stuff, right? It's right by Highway 1. So it's a lot of, like, passerbys. No one's really hanging out there. They get me, drive me to the hospital, and I'm sitting there. I show up. I have a huge smile on my face. The doctors and the nurses are like, you're crazy, dude. They start bringing in all the doctors and nurses to look at my ankle, and I'm like, why are they bringing in all these people to look at me? Turns out, like, the way you break your leg or your ankle, out of all of the people that do break their leg, only 10% of people break their leg the way I did.
Wow.
So you have your fibula and your tibula that are at the bottom that meet at your ankle, right? So instead of, like, breaking the bone, they split.
So it, like, the bone split in half lengthwise?
Yes.
Jesus.
Yes. So it's split in half lengthwise, so that's why my ankle was dangling down right there. And it ruptured. It ruptured my ligament, which shot all the way up to my knee, and it then at the top, my fibula severed in half as well.
Oh my god!
So if you like,
catastrophic, dude.
So if you're laying down, right, and you look at your foot and your toes are pointing up, they were the complete opposite way.
Damn.
Yeah, and so I went through that, and it was a tough recovery, you know, but like, I'm tough, and I was like, I'll get through it.
So what was the pain level like? Was there pain for you?
At the time, no. Well, driving to the hospital, yes. But at the time, it didn't really hurt. Okay. I think I was just more in shock than anything. But as we were driving to the hospital, my foot was bouncing up and down. I was like, oh, slow down. I was telling my buddy to go slow, but he's like, I got to get you to the hospital. I'm like, bro, you're making it worse. Yeah. Slow down.
Yeah.
But what hurt the most was probably the recovery, because, like, if you stand up, all the blood's rushing to your ankle, and, like, I couldn't even get out of bed I couldn't even go take a piss without my ankle, like, being in severe pain. And given, you know, my housemates and everyone, they're all working and stuff, so I'm basically on my own. So it's I gotta crawl out of bed, go down the hallway to the hospital or to the bathroom, use the restroom, get back, and it was a lot of pain to go through. And what hurt the most was probably the physical therapy, because you're sitting there trying to break up all of the scar tissue and trying to build back the muscle and it's really hard to build back your ligaments, right? Because those take a long time to heal, because you don't have as much blood flow going to those areas, right? And that's where your oxygen and nutrients come from, is through your blood, right? So it's hard to heal those. So that's what took the longest, was healing that severed ligament. that shot up through my leg towards my knee.
Wow. Dude.
They ended up putting in 2 pins into my ankle, healed it, and I think it took about 6 months or something like that before I was like actually really feeling good to be able to walk around and be on my feet without a boot and stuff. So,
you know, I've never had a catastrophic injury like that, and I'm lucky to say so. I know, but that's like one of my worst fears, but I also see it as like a blessing too, because you get some time to slow down. I imagine a lot of time to yourself to rethink a lot of things.
oh yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about that? Is there anything you can share from that experience?
Yeah, it puts a lot of stuff in perspective, right? Because again, like I had stopped skateboarding for nearly almost 10 years because I had fully, when I get into something, I fully dive into it. So when I got into high school and I found wrestling, it was like that was it.
All or nothing.
So I wasn't really skateboarding because I was like, this is what I'm doing right now. Once I got out of college and that career was over, I was like, you know what? I don't know if I see myself going to wrestle internationally or anything like that. I kind of needed a break, you know. After about like 12 years of wrestling, you're like, you know, I need to step away for a little bit. And that's where skateboarding came back in, right? And then of course I ended up getting hurt. But given the reason why I was so into skateboarding again was because I was like, dude, I'm still good at this. Like I can still do this. You know, I was like, hey, maybe I can do something with this.
Right.
And my whole idea of even going to college was to start a skate company or like at least a local shop. I went in for business. I went in for small business entrepreneurship, and I wanted to start a skateboarding company. I wanted to make skateboards, you know what I mean? Because when I was younger, it was always those older kids that were giving me boards and supporting me that like hyped me up, you know? I was like, dude, these guys are dope.
That's
like,
awesome.
And I wanted to provide that for someone. I wanted to provide that for the kids, you know? I was like, I want to be that cool adult that's like, here's a free skateboard, dude. Like, here's some wheels. You know, go have some fun. I was like, that's where I want to be. And cool. Hurt my ankle, and then now you're sitting there in bed, like thinking about every little scenario of what you did. And my bed was right next to my window, right? So I'm in Daly City. I'm at top of the hill. So I'm laying in bed, and I could see all of the houses. They talk about the houses on the hill, you know, the little boxes on the hill. And I could see the beach. So I'm literally sitting there every day, just like looking at the water, looking at the houses, seeing the cars go by. And I'm just like, man, like, what am I doing? Like, where am I at in my life right now? And it kind of like starts to put everything in perspective of like what you truly value and what you really want to do with yourself. Right. Especially when you can't get out of bed and you're laying there for hours on end, you know, for 4 months laying in bed. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, because like you have nothing but yourself there. And you're it's not like you're doing it to where you're like, you know what, I'm going to step outside. I'm going to go be with myself. It's like, no, I'm forced to be with myself now. Yeah. And now like all I have is my own thoughts. And but the great thing is I had wrestling that taught me that mental toughness. So it's not like I was beating myself up and being like, you know, putting myself down. It was like, okay, what do I got to do now to get off of my feet? What's the next step to achieve some new goals, right? So laying in bed, I started looking up PT. Instead of like, oh, I'm going to wait for the doctor, I was like, let me look up all this PT stuff. So I literally planned out 6 months of PT and strength training and stuff to do to get my ankle better. Because I was like, I'm an active person. If I'm not active, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Like, I love being physically active. So I was like, let me plan all this stuff out. I started researching, started getting into all of this stuff. I started getting into personal training. I was like, you know what? I ordered a bunch of personal training books. I ordered a bunch of PT books. I ordered these coloring books for like your body where you get to learn like the muscles and stuff. Wow. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm going to do this. So I can fully recover and get back to doing things that I love, like wrestling and skateboarding. So that's kind of like where I stemmed into, because it was like, you know what, and I think that's what kind of got me into wanting to teach wrestling and coach wrestling.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was the calling.
That was
for
the
you.
calling. Yeah.
Shit. So you found a way to keep your mind positive, thinking positively. And it sounds like there wasn't very many dark moments for you, or
there were. So like with me, and it's funny because I'm on the outside, a lot of people see me as like an extroverted person, a very outgoing person, like very relatable person. Inside, like I'm very introverted. I'm an extroverted introvert, right? Like there's like Tom Brown mentioned, like you were talking about in that last podcast about that void, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's in there with me and it's instilled with me. I feel like everyone is kind of like seeking or searching something, whether you're searching for enlightenment, searching for your purpose in life, or like searching what you want to do, like whatever it is. Like I have that in me, and it comes back from past traumas when I was younger. So I grew up, and I didn't understand this. I didn't realize it until college that I realized, like, dude, like I have a lot of anxiety and depression, and I use all of these physical things in my life as my outlet. It was like, how do I get this out? Like, I'm going to deteriorate myself. I'm going to push myself to the limits, to the brink of near death with these physical things to kind of like get it all out rather than like let it eat me up inside. But when I can't do that and I'm laying there in bed with a hurt ankle, like you get those overwhelming feelings of doubt and like, what am I doing with my life? You know what I mean? You start questioning everything that you've done and like where your life is headed. And it gets dark. It gets dark at times, right? But then when you look out the window and you see the sun setting, the sun rising, and you're like, you know what? There's still some good out there.
Yeah.
There's still some good.
Did you have anybody around to support you? Because I imagine that's a heavy, heavy burden to look out for yourself in that way. It already is when you're on your own, you're living on your own. But when you're injured and you have nobody to basically care for your basic needs, right?
Yeah.
Did you have anybody there to relieve you of that?
I had some housemates that were really cool, right? They would help me out. They would help me out with some groceries and stuff.
Wow.
And they would help me a little bit. But the thing is like you get a little tired of helping someone a lot, right? Especially when it's like day in and day out and they're not like an immediate family member or someone you genuinely like fully care about. It's like, yes, they're kind of my friends, but they're more so just my housemates, right? So I saved up all this money. I'm like, I love Japan. I love anime, right?
Yeah.
I was saving up all this money to go to Japan. I was saving up all this money to go to Japan. I depleted my entire savings because I got hurt just by ordering food, and it was mostly food and groceries and Uber Eats and all that stuff. I was like, you know what? I need to eat. I can't cook. My housemates are getting tired of helping me out. I was like ordering food almost every single day. Wow. So it got tough, and I ended up wasting like a couple $1,000s just because I was in bed. And it took maybe like 4 months for like disability to finally kick in and start cashing me back. But by that time, I was back up on my feet. Yeah. You know, and it was like, well, now it was like starting over. It was like completely starting over, like physically and financially.
Wow. What a story. That's a story, man. You emerged from that. So then you decide that you want to start coaching. Your second injury was... So your first was your ankle. The second was
my shoulder.
Your shoulder.
So I get injured, right? Luckily at the moving company, our boss, Wolfgang, he's an awesome, cool dude. They let me work in the office, right? They let me work in the office. They knew I was hurt until I was able to get back on the trucks. So at that time, I wasn't really doing much. And turns out this buddy of mine I used to wrestle with. Back in the day when they had Uber and you can actually share the ride with someone, right? Yeah. Pre-COVID. I end up getting an Uber. I'm going home, and he ends up getting in the Uber with me. And I'm like, yo, Mickey, what's up? Like, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I just got done with wrestling practice. I'm like, wrestling practice? He's like, yeah, I coach over at Lowell High School.
And you hadn't seen him prior.
I hadn't seen him prior. And it was just mere coincidence, right? That injure my ankle, finally get back onto my feet, and then wrestling shows up. And I'm like, dude, I think walking around on a wrestling mat, running around on a wrestling mat will be good for my ankle. You know, it's a soft mat, very structured shoes that you'll be wearing, so it kind of helps with the ankle support. And I was like, yo, I'd love to come help out. I'll volunteer. I'll work for free. Like, I don't care. they're like, yeah, come. He's like, yeah, come by, come check it out. And so end up the following season joining him. And turns out he wasn't even really there that much. It was this other guy, Cruz, that I ended up meeting. Random guy, don't even know him. But I ended up being there every single day for wrestling practice. Because it's like, that's what it is with wrestling, right? When you're on the team and you're a part of that team, it's day in and day out, like, you're the example for those kids too, right? And it's like, if I'm only there half-assing it and I'm there a few days of the week, what are the kids going to be doing for that sport, right? Wrestling is very tough, it's very disciplined, and not a lot of people finish the season because it's so hard, right? So I was like, I got to be a good example. So I was there every single day with this dude that I had just met, right? Through I thought my friend Mickey was going to be there, but turns out he wasn't really there that much.
Right. Where was this at again?
Lowell High School.
Lowell High School.
Lowell High School. Yeah, so it's by Lake Merced, right behind San Francisco State University.
Yeah, one of the most prestigious public high schools in the United States.
Dude, these kids are smart, man. Yeah. These kids are smart. They're smarter than me, which is crazy. Like, after one of the practices, right, one of the girls was just like, I need help with my physics homework. I'm like, man, y'all are doing physics? They're like, yeah, I need help. And this kid, Michael, super smart kid, goes up, does this entire physics problem out of his head, right? And solves the problem for her and was like, this is how you do it, shows her how to do it. I'm like, man, like, these kids are something else. Like, the way they teach them, the way how disciplined they already are based off of their academics, right? So I was like, oh, these kids are going to be great for wrestling, right? They're already so disciplined, but they can barely move their bodies and stuff, right? They're all brain, no brawn.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, but yeah, like, I got into it, and Cruz ended up becoming my best friend. And like, after like a month or so, we both like stopped during one of the practices, looked at each other, and we're like, dude, feels like we've been coaching together forever.
Oh, cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's something that wrestling does, is like, it creates this bond between people, whether you know them or not. Like, it's instant, like, respect of, like, you went through the grind, you went through the toughest sport that anyone can do, right? Especially if you went all the way through college, right? Then it's like, you're something else. And it's like that instant respect for each other, where it's like, I don't even have to talk much to you. I just know who you are as a person just because of what you went through.
I want to try to paint a picture of who you are.
Yeah.
Before we get into the wrestling stuff, because I would love to dive into that. So,
and then if you wanted me to go back about the shoulder thing too.
Oh yeah. Let's do that.
So real quick, going into the shoulder, right? So we're wrestling season, right? I'm coaching and all that stuff. It's all fun. Off season, my friend invites me out to Dolores Park, and they have the hill bomb there, right?
Yeah.
If you know about San Francisco, there's this big giant hill bomb that goes down every year, where all the skateboarders in San Francisco and people outside of San Francisco come, right? And it's Dolores Park. It's this massive 4-block hill. Like, you look up the hill and you're like, hell no, I'm not going down that thing, right? But I've skated my entire life. I've done it before, and I was like, you know what? Like, I wasn't even planning on skating down there. Like, my friend from out of town was there. My housemate's dad was there. I was like, you know what? Let's go hang out. I show up, I get there, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go down the hill. I go down once, perfectly fine. And then they're like, hey, we're going to go eat, let's go. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. I go to the top of the hill. I was like, I'll meet you at the bottom, because that's where the food spot's at. Start going down the hill, and I got it. I'm at the last hill. And it's not that I don't know how to skate or know how to get down the hill. It's mostly the crowd there, right? Because you have hundreds of people crowding this tiny little street, right? There's this girl. She wasn't paying attention. She had her dog on her leash. The dog runs out into the street, cuts right in front of me. I start swerving. I veer out, and I start power sliding, and you get speed wobbles, and it gets to the point to where, like, you can't control the board under your feet anymore because you're going so fast and you got off balance already that your board's just shaking. It's rattling under your feet. Your feet are slipping and sliding on the skateboard. And I thought I was about to have it. I power slid a little bit, and I was like, all right, I'm going to pull this thing back together. You know the little reflectors in the middle of the street, like the blue reflectors? I rode right over that, and my trucks went under it, and I slid right out.
Fuck.
At that point, like, I kind of just closed my eyes, rode the wave.
Oh, shit.
Fell, popped back up, and I feel someone grabbing me, and someone's like, dude, you just slid like 50 feet. Like, that was insane, you know? And I'm just like, whoa, that was crazy. And my heart is pumping, my adrenaline is going. And I was like, oh, my shoulder kind of hurts. Like, oh, my shoulder kind of hurts. First thing I do, I run back up the hill and grab my skateboard. Didn't even think of anything else besides, like, grab my skateboard, you know? And then my other buddy, his friend's there, and he's like, hey, I know I used to put people's dislocated shoulders back into place. Let me check it out. I rip off my shirt. He takes one look at it, and he's like, I'm not touching it. I'm like, all right. I go back to my buddy. We end up getting into the car, and I was like, hey, we need to go to the hospital. We need to go to the hospital now. They thought I was joking again. And I was like, no, this is serious, bro. And they look, and my shoulder's, like, so dipped down. My bone is, like, sticking up this high. Go to the hospital. Turns out I completely severed my AC joint. So they have severities, right? 1 through 5. 5 being that your bone is through the skin. Mm-hmm. Mine was at 4, and they said that there was the tiniest layer of skin that was barely keeping my bone from coming out.
Oh, God.
So I ended up getting surgery on my shoulder. The wound ended up getting infected a month later, so I had to get surgery again for them to flush it out. Put me on antibiotics. Mm-hmm. Didn't go away still. Turns out it was the metal plating they put in my shoulder, which was supposed to stay in there, right?
Damn, dude.
That piece is supposed to stay in there and hold my shoulder together.
Yep.
They take that plate out a couple of months later. So I ended up having 4 surgeries on my shoulder, and had to do extensive PT again. And okay, this is the crazy thing. After the 4th time of going under amnesia to get this out, maybe it was the amnesia talking or whatever, right? I come out of it, and I start bawling, dude. I'm crying my eyes out. And the nurse is like, what's wrong? Are you okay? And I'm just tearing. And I'm like, this is it, isn't it? This is it. And she's, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I'm like, I'm never going to wrestle again. I'm never going to be able to wrestle again in my life.
Yeah.
Like, this is it. Like, it just hit me. And when you were talking about, like, that dark place, right? I was there. I was there for a long time, especially after that injury.
After the shoulder injury.
Yeah. I was in bed for 4 months. So I had long hair. My hair almost went down to my butt, right? Started turning into a nasty dreadlock. I had to, like, chop that off. I couldn't get out of bed for 4 months without, like, my shoulder severely hurt. Like, I will stand up for 30 seconds out of my bed, and I'd have to lay right back down. It was so bad. And I was freaking out, and, like, that was, like, the cap of, like, I'm never going to be able to do physical stuff again.
Wow.
Like, just based off of that.
Yeah.
And once again, got back into the PT stuff and started working the shoulder, and started getting lively again once I realized, like, okay, my shoulder's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was like, that was the end of the world for me, you know?
Dude, you're an animal, dude. I remember when we were working together, you had injured now I'm starting to remember, you had injured your foot.
Yeah.
While we were working together. And then during the Panda,
yep,
you injured your shoulder.
Yes.
Fuck, man. And for those listening too, yeah, you are a legit skater. Your Instagram videos are, I mean, I've watched skate videos my whole life, man.
Yeah.
And they're legit. You put me onto a lot of things on the drives that I'm remembering that we were on together. You're the one that, I mean, I've been living in San Francisco my whole life, had no idea that it was a mecca.
Yep.
For the bombings.
Yeah.
For the hill bombs. And then you put me on that, and ever since I've just been addicted to, like, skate videos. I always go back to skate videos because of you.
Yeah.
Even the East Coast GSX
the GX
1000.
Yep.
The fact that they're one take Jakes
yep.
when it comes to, like, skate videos and skate tricks, I was like, wow, because of how quickly you'll get rolled on by the cops in New York.
Yeah.
And that was just an eye opener to me too, based on the skating culture, because I just feel skating culture in general just has such a great feel for visual aesthetics, musical aesthetics, and I would love to get into that at another time. But
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, the wrestling is what I kind of prepared for.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
how are you doing? Do you need to take a break at all?
chilling, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna take a piss really quick.
Yeah,
If that's
do your
cool.
thing.
Cool. What a trip, dude. That guy that you saw. Refresh my memory again. You walked into the Uber with him.
Yeah,
And
so,
you hadn't seen him in how many years?
I probably hadn't seen him in maybe about like 8 years, 6-8 years, something like that, right?
What are the fucking odds?
And what are the odds, right?
What are the
and
odds?
it was like it was meant to be, right? It was meant for me to get back into wrestling. Like I mentioned earlier, like wrestling draws me back for some reason, right? It just keeps on pulling me in. It was like I'm meant to be on the wrestling mat. I'm meant to be coaching kids and teaching them because of how much wrestling taught me and how much wrestling gave me.
Yeah.
That it's like I'm paying it forward finally.
Yeah, dude.
It feels like it's where I'm meant to be.
Hell yeah. Whoa, what a story. I wasn't expecting to hear that. I was just like thinking, yeah, man, I've been wrestling my whole life and, that kind of thing.
Well, most wrestlers get into wrestling, well, at least those that are in college, when they're 8 years old, very young.
Yeah.
They get into the club scene
Sure.
where it's like, they're not necessarily being forced into it, but they're like going to all these tournaments as kids, like big tournaments, big tournaments. And I was never around that as a kid. I only got into wrestling in high school because I didn't make the basketball team.
Wow. All right. So you tried out for the wrestling team, and then, yeah. What's your run from freshman year to senior year of college?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one, right? So I hurt my ankle in football. I play football, go for the basketball team, don't make the team, and then I was like, you know what? I'll go to wrestling. And they're like, hey, we got a spot for you. Come on, we'll wait till your ankle's good. Just do what you can. And my freshman year, it was kind of like, all right, this is very foreign. I have no idea what's going on. We're in this tiny little room. There's a bunch of like boys just kind of smothering each other, and it's like, I don't really know any moves. I don't really know anything. And I'm just in there getting beat up.
Yeah.
Like getting beat up by all these experienced guys, right? And my high school, actually, I was the first class to go from freshman to senior year. So we had my freshman year, we only had sophomores, or freshmen and sophomores. Our coach, he was kind of weird. Ended up leaving after the freshman year. Sophomore year comes around, we get a new coach. And he's like, what are you guys doing? Like, you're not even wrestling. I guess we had got taught everything wrong when I was a freshman. So it's not like I even knew what I was doing. Sophomore year comes around, and we get this pretty cool coach, Kevin Elak, man. I love him. Love the guy. Became literally like my father figure. Like I mentioned, right? Like, I didn't really have parents around too much. So he kind of became the one, right? That was like my guidance, my like outlet of like someone to look up to. And sophomore year, I'm kind of starting to learn the moves, get into it. And there's this kid that actually had been wrestling his entire life.
From Santa Maria?
Yeah.
Okay.
Freestyle state champion, like really good kid, right? I ended up doing a challenge match with him because the way wrestling works is you have all these weight classes. You have 14 weight classes all the way from back in the day. What it was 103 pounds all the way up to 285 pounds. And you have 14 weight classes between those, right? And I was always one of the smaller guys. I was supposed to wrestle at 112 pounds. But this kid there was just so good, so good. And they have challenge matches. So you usually have about 3 or 4 kids in each weight class. The number one guy is the one that wins. So you do challenge matches in the wrestling room. So before you even get to compete on the mat, you have to compete with your teammates. But before that, let me go back to freshman year, right? My very first wrestling tournament, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, very first wrestling tournament. My dad actually shows up to go, right? And I'm like, I had to show him proof because I was like, you know what? Like, my dad already thinks this is weird that I'm wrestling. I was like, I gotta show him what it's all about. I wrestled this kid. He kind of looked like a little roly-poly dude. Got like his little baby fat still, I'm on this tiny little scrawny kid. And like, right before I step on the mat, I look up in the stands and I see my dad. And I was like, all right, I have to win this match. So that my dad is like, okay, cool. Like, go ahead and wrestle.
Yeah.
first thing I do is like I double leg the kid. So I shoot in, I wrap my arms around both of his legs, and I stand up and pick him up, you know, because all I know was like WWF type of stuff, right? Like body slams and all that crazy high flying stuff. I pick this kid up super high and I like dump him onto his back and like end up getting the pin where both of his shoulders are down. I end up winning, right? And I look up to the stands right away, right back at my dad, and I'm just like, I'm an animal, I'm a beast, you know what I mean? I'm not that fragile little kid you think I am, you know, because I'm like barely a buck 100 pounds, you know, super scrawny and tiny, and like I always had something to prove being the little guy.
Yep.
And so then from then on, like it was like, all right, this is what I'm doing. Like this is where it's at. So come back to sophomore year, get a real coach where I actually know what I'm doing. And I have to wrestle this challenge match with this kid that's been wrestling his entire life. I end up scoring a few points on him, almost pinning him and winning the match. I still lost, right, because he has the experience. A week later, he quit.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know if it was like he just was over it because he was doing it so long as a kid, or that he realized like, hey, I'm going to have to work for my number one spot on this team. Like, I don't want to work that hard. So he just quit. He just left. And I was like, okay. And then my coach looks at me and he's like, well, you're the number one varsity guy now. So as a sophomore, I'm like, all right, well, I'm bumping up and I'm wrestling all seniors now, basically, as a varsity.
Shit. So you made varsity at sophomore.
As a sophomore year. And it was then about halfway through my sophomore season. So I had this girlfriend, right, that I was with since seventh grade. So we were together from 7th all the way to sophomore year. I was in love, you know. It was the first girl I had slept with and stuff like that. So it was like, I'm in love. I'm young, you know.
Sure.
This is the one. This is my girl. You know, we're gonna get married. She ends up cheating on me and leaving me, and it broke my heart. And the only thing I really had there was wrestling.
Whoa.
And I would show up to wrestling practice crying. I'd be crying every day. And my coach was like, cut that out. Put your shoes on and get on the mat. Hurry up, get on the mat. And I'm just like, I don't want to do this. And then wrestling then became my outlet of emotions, right? Because back in the day, right, especially with like my dad and like the way you're supposed to be brought up as like a man and like not show emotion and stuff like that. So it was like, okay, wrestling's my outlet now. Like instead of crying and being a big baby, I'm gonna wrestle and stuff like that. And my dad comes from like this crazy background of so my hometown's on gangland, and my dad was this big cholo with like, you know, wearing his Dickies and his wife beater and stuff. I don't know much about my dad's childhood growing up. He doesn't talk about it. I'm pretty sure he was big into like gang affiliated stuff and like never really talks about that, because once he injured his back, he wasn't in all that stuff, you know. So I kind of went out the window. So it was like, all right, well, I got to show and prove myself. And then wrestling kind of just became my outlet, because I was always the small guy and I got picked on every day. Like I grew up in this very tough town where like these four guys would wait for me after school all the time and beat me up. And I was like, you know what, I got to get tough, I got to get strong, and wrestling became that for me. And with my girlfriend breaking up with me and cheating on me, I was so fueled and fired up, and wrestling, like I was just full go, full board. I was like, this is it. I was pushing myself every single day, like super, super hard. And my coach saw something. He's like, dude, like, you're going to get really good. So after my sophomore year, he's like, hey, do you want to go to a wrestling camp? And I'm like, what? They have those? Over summer. I'm like, yeah, all right. Like, I'll go check it out. I end up meeting all these kids all over the country and like going to this cool like camp. And I was like, you know what? This is it. This is for me. So I put I didn't even focus on school that much, to be honest. Like, we had study hall, and I would walk around, and every class that I had or whatever subject I had, I would be like, hey, you have that teacher, you have this teacher, give me your homework. Like, give me your homework. I'm copying your homework so I can have grades so I can wrestle. And that was it. Like, that was what I wanted to do. And my sophomore year, I end up qualifying for sections. So the way it works is you have your season, And at the end of the season, you have your league tournament where if you take top 3, you go to the section tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go to the section tournament, you go to Masters and then state.
Okay.
I ended up qualifying for sections. And I was like, oh, I'm actually pretty good, And so I ended up going after my junior year, going to this very intensive wrestling camp where it's like 15 days. You wake up in the morning, 7 a.m., go for a run, have breakfast, have a wrestling session, have lunch, have a wrestling session after that. And each session is about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have dinner. Mm-hmm. And then you go to the weight room and you lift. And mind you, these are all college kids that are teaching all these high school kids how to do all this stuff. So by the end of it, like, I was shredded. I was ripped. I was like peak of my athletic performance as a junior in high school. And the end of the camp, they make you run 14 miles for a T-shirt.
Holy shit.
14 miles for a T-shirt. So out of a couple hundred kids, I ended up taking 3rd out of all of them. Just because I was so like into it. I was like so about like pushing myself to the limit because I was tired of feeling. I was like, you know what? If people are going to make me feel down and sad and bad about myself, right? And push me to these feelings that I don't like feeling, I was like, no one's going to do that to myself but me. So I started pushing myself to the limit. I was like, you know what? I was like, if I can push myself harder than people can push me, then whatever anyone does to me, like, it's not going to affect me. Like, emotionally, physically, like, it doesn't matter. And I started developing this, like, mental state, this mental toughness of, like, it doesn't matter the situation. It doesn't matter what I'm really going through. I'm going to find a way to push myself through it.
Wow.
Just because it doesn't matter. I'm going to find a way. That's it. I think it was my junior year where things really hit home of, like, how hard I was really pushing myself. Like, I went to the league, right? Go to league. Again, my junior year, I wrestled this kid, Baker, from Rigetti High School. Tough kid. They're tough as nails, right? Super strong. We ended up going into overtime in the finals, and I ended up taking him down, and I win the match, and it was pretty cool. And this random guy comes up to me. I have no idea who he is, and he's like, "Hey, you deserve that, man." I was like, "Oh, thank you." He's like, "Yeah, I see you run past my house every morning."
Oh, fuck yeah, dude.
So I would run before high school. I would go for a run every morning. It was about like 5-mile run every single morning before high school. And people were noticing. And
fuck yeah, man.
And it was interesting, how me just isolating myself and pushing myself that hard was affecting the other people around me. And going into my senior year, I didn't even think about college. I didn't think about my future very much. I just kind of thought about like what was in front of me and wrestling and like this is it. And my senior year came around and my high school coach was like, "Hey, you want to go to college?" And I was like, "I can do that."
No shit. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started applying to all these colleges, reaching out to the wrestling coaches and stuff like that. I wasn't really very known yet for wrestling, right? You have all these kids that are ranked in state and known in state and stuff like that. And I wasn't very known. So I was like, you know what? I have to prove myself this year if I really want to go to a college and wrestle. So I started pushing even harder. Even harder.
Okay.
Like, so I was running in the morning, and then I would go to the weight room in the morning, and then I would go to high school.
Shit. Okay.
And during class, right, I became my high school teacher's, what do you call that again? His teacher's aide. For my last block of high school, and instead of being in his room, I'd be in the wrestling room.
Oh, fuck.
And yeah, and then
so you had more time to train.
More time to train. Yes, more time to train. So that was like literally my life. And my parents didn't really understand it. My mom was just kind of like, "Okay, do your thing."
Can I interrupt you really quick?
Yeah.
Was that by design? Was there teachers that were like, "Hey, this kid could go somewhere. Let's have this last block available." for them to train.
My wrestling coach.
So he pulled the strings for you to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my high school coach literally like guided me through everything. Right. I was very naive. I didn't really plan for the future. I wasn't the brightest or smartest kid. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I failed a lot of classes. Like I was horrible at math. It wasn't until like I had to make grades for wrestling that I was like, okay, I gotta like actually start learning how to do my schoolwork a little bit. I can't depend on all these kids doing my homework for me.
Yeah.
Especially if I go to college. So senior year comes around, right? And start applying to all the colleges, and I had to make a name for myself because I wasn't ranked or anything like that. And my coach made a deal with me, right? He got me into sushi and all this cool stuff. He's like, hey, every tournament you win, I'll take you out to sushi. And I was like, bro, that's like a couple $100 every time you go out to sushi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're ordering a bunch of
wow. What a cool dude.
Yeah, he's awesome dude. Became my father figure, right? Was taking me like freestyle tournaments. After my junior year, was taking me to all these freestyle tournaments. He took me to Las Vegas for the U.S. Open. I ended up going 2-2. I actually won some matches there and stuff. But it was all for fun. And so he kind of like was allowing me to see where wrestling could take me. My senior year, I was like, okay, I have to win every single tournament.
Yeah.
I got to do this. So season starts. I'm winning all these matches. I'm winning every tournament. Halfway through the season, there's this kid that's ranked in state. And I meet him in the finals. And I was like, okay. I was like, this is it. This is the match, right? And it's this big, I forget the name of the tournament, to be honest. But it was this big tournament, right? They do this thing where at big tournaments where the finals matches, they usually have about like 6 or 7 mats set up and all the matches are going on at the same time. But they break all that down. They have one mat.
It's like black it out.
Yeah. Put the spotlight on you. You have this giant crowd, right? We even had these singlets where it was like, they're these cool white singlets where you only get to wear them if you're in the finals. Get into that tournament, and I was like, I have to beat this kid. Like, I have to beat this kid. We start wrestling, and the crowd is going insane, right? But for some reason, it was quiet. It was silent. All I could hear was my coach's voice, right? So the way wrestling works is it's 3 2-minute periods. Where you get points by taking the person down. You get points by exposing their back and getting escapes and stuff like that. Going into the third period, I am losing. I'm losing. It's 2-0. He has 2 points. I have 0 points. And you start in different positions. I was starting in the top position. And if you expose their back to the mat for 5 seconds, you get 3 points. And I'm wrestling on top. I'm trying to get this guy's back to the mat, and there's like 30 seconds left, and I hear my coach yelling, you know, and like something just clicked. It was like all of my exhaustion, all of my tiredness went away. I felt like nothing was really mattered. I was kind of like in that moment. It was a really, really weird feeling. It was the first time I had ever felt, you know, people talk about like flipping the switch or like that flow state of mind where everything is just, you're in the zone, you're that tunnel vision, and you're going. First time I had ever felt that in my life. I exposed the kid's back to the mat, end up getting the 3 points, and rolls out, and the crowd's going nuts. The crowd's cheering, but I didn't hear him. All I heard was like my coach, you know, and end up rolling him up, and ref blows the whistle, and I look around, and I'm like, I won. I won the match. Like,
yeah.
No way. You know what I mean? And like, I go, they raise your hand, like you win. I step off the mat. The feeling that I got was just like, it's very hard to explain. Like you're floating on cloud 9, you know, and like it's. My coach comes over to me, you know, it's like, yeah, gives me a hug and stuff. And I'm just like, that was where it was like, I can take this to the next level.
Yeah.
But that feeling, that flow state, once I felt that, that's what I started to chase after now. I didn't care about the winning so much. It was like, I want to feel that feeling again. That's what I really want. Like, that's what I've been chasing after. I finally found what I've been chasing after my entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, dude. Thank you for sharing that. That's what it's all about, dude. When you can shut everything out of your head and have that extreme focus, and you're not asking for it.
No.
It just comes to you.
Yeah.
Because you've worked hard, because you've had rituals leading up to that moment. And you can even say even your coach bringing you there too. I mean,
Yep.
You know, I don't know. I value those moments as an athlete. I wasn't a high school athlete. I was more of a musician, artistic type of like burnout in high school. But, you know, you hit those flow states and it's a magical thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to put it into words, but the way you did it was just so, that's beautiful, man. That's so cool.
I tried, you know, it's a type of thing that's like very hard to explain unless you feel it, unless you go through it, right? So I had won 43 matches as a senior and had lost 0, right? And it was my senior year where I was like, dude, I'm good. I know I'm good now. Like, I know I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good at wrestling. And going to sections, when my first 2, so it's a 2-day tournament. You have to take top 8 to move on to the next tournament to start going to state, right? Which is like the big show. I've wrestled my first 2 matches. I win. My 3rd match, I'm wrestling the number 1 ranked guy at the tournament, right? And I don't ever think about who I'm wrestling or what they look like or what school they come from. Like, I would let my coach do all that stuff. I would just show up and wrestle.
Yeah.
So I'm wrestling this kid, and we end up going into triple overtime. So the way overtime works is you wrestle your 3 periods. You go into a 1-minute sudden death victory. Whoever gets the first point wins. Nobody got a point. Go into the next overtime, which is like 2 30-second rounds. You both get an opportunity to score a point. If I score a point, then he gets another 30 seconds to potentially score a point. We both end up scoring a point.
Oh,
right?
Shit.
So we're tied again.
Yeah.
You go into another sudden death victory, back onto your feet. Whoever scores a point wins. No one wins. Then it comes down to the very last 30 seconds. Mind you, after this, we have had already been wrestling for 9 minutes. Like, if you've ever wrestled someone and you just wrestle for like 30 seconds, you're tired.
Yeah.
Like, you're tired.
Yeah.
All right, we're already 9 minutes deep as a high school kid, you know? And we're wrestling. I'm up by 1 point on this kid, right? The clock's about to end. The kid's grabbing on my ankle. We're on the edge of the mat. He's almost about to take me down to score a point. And I just need to hold it. And I can't really recall if my coach yelled at me to do it or if I just did it instinctively. But I tried to like turn and kick my leg out when all I really needed to do was just sit there. And the kid caught my ankle and ended up scoring some points, and I lost the match. Like, how devastating is that to like go undefeated all the way up to this point and finally lose a match when you're like, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to be the state champion. You know what I mean? Like, on my ceiling of my bedroom, I had all of my goals listed out, and next to my goals, I had my record. And the biggest stamp on my goals was California state champion. Like, that was what I was chasing. And I lose that match, and it was like I lost everything. I lost everything, right?
Wow.
So go to the second day of the tournament. Now I have to battle back to place to make it, to move on. Wrestle my first kid, and I'm angry. I'm so angry. Like, I'm mad. I've never been that mad before. And beat the living snot out of this kid, right? I was like, I wasn't out there to wrestle anymore. Like, I was out there to hurt people.
Oh, shit.
And it kind of backfired on me.
Yeah.
beat one kid, beat the next kid. Now the next match, it's like if I win this one, no matter what happens after this one, I'll wrestle one more, but I place.
Yeah.
I'm beating the kid 15-2, right? 15-2. If you get up ahead by someone by 15 points, they stop the match. It's a technical fall. I force a takedown on the kid. The kid catches me on my back, and I get pinned.
So you lose.
So I lose.
You lose on a pin.
I lose on a pin, and I don't get to move on. And I was like, and in my head, I'm like, there's my shot at going to college to wrestle. I completely flopped down to the mat, and I couldn't even lift myself up. My body just would not function. My body wouldn't function. They had to carry me off the mat. They take me to the locker room. They let go of me, and I flopped down and I was trying to stand up. I just couldn't stand up, like physically and mentally drained. And, I finally get out. My mom comes out of the stands, and I grab onto her. Like, I'm tearing up thinking about it. And I'm hanging on to my mom, and I'm crying for like an hour in my mom's arms, like a little baby girl. Everything I had worked for, like I'm tearing up. You see it?
Yeah.
Haunts me till this day.
Yeah, that's... Wow. Thanks for sharing that, brother.
But still ended up going to college and wrestling.
Yeah. I'm starting to see a pattern in your life now where, you're pushing yourself to these limits, man. And it's beautiful, dude. It's almost like the perfect storm.
Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned the breakup and this coach coming into your life sophomore year, those things that push you, and then you start thinking like, because you've pushed yourself to these limits, there are certain moments where you experience loss.
Yes.
And you think it's going to be over, but then it's like, hey, I'm back on my feet again.
Yeah. Yeah. And that stems from the mental toughness that you learn through the process, right? Through the process of building yourself up, like through the process of developing your technique, right? You start, because when you do something so repetitiously over and over and over again, something starts to develop in your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, I know what it takes to be able to keep moving forward, right? You start to build layer on top of layer of like getting a thick skin, no matter what it is. Like if I consistently keep moving forward, I'll eventually be past this moment.
Yeah, you start to believe in yourself that, you have failed so many times, but because of those failures, the next step isn't that bad.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess. I could see that too. I mean, I've worked in kitchens for a while, and you make mistakes. You fuck up. You cut your finger. You send something that tastes bad, and somebody sends it back, and it's like devastating.
Yeah, that hits you hard.
Your peers see you, your chef sees you, and it's just like crushing. It's crushing. So I know where I have an idea of where you're coming from, but that's, pushing your mental and physical self to that point. That's got to give you a lot of stuff to draw back from. And the fact that you experienced that at an early age too, in high school, not a lot of kids experience that, man, which is, you're giving it to them as a coach, and that's beautiful. But, I was digging up, I went through a lot of your social media feed. Yeah. And I saw that you went to SF State. Yes. And you paid a tribute to, guy's name is, I have it on my notes here, Lars Jensen.
Coach Lars
Jensen.
Yes.
So since this is called the Quake City Portal, we're here in San Francisco. A lot of people don't know that SF State is kind of like a West Coast. What would you say? Is it kind of a... I mean, this guy, I'm going to read off some of his accolades, right? Yeah. 1997 NCAA championship as a coach. Numerous articles since he's recently passed away on the Examiner. You, as I said, you made a tribute to him on your Instagram. 122 national championship qualifiers, 62 All-Americans, 10 individual national champions, San Francisco State Hall of Fame, California Hall of Fame, National Wrestling Hall of Fame. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been so fascinated with the sport recently in digging up the history. And here's the most fascinating thing is that this sport connects us millenniums before us to people that were doing the same fucking thing.
Yep.
But I just want to go back to Lars Jensen because you had an opportunity to be coached by this guy.
Yes.
So, what was the atmosphere like?
Oh man, that's a very interesting one.
Training under a guy like this.
Yeah. Very interesting, right? Because of what happened in my senior year, right? It was hard to kind of be like colleges being like, "Hey, I'm going to give you some money to come wrestle for me," right? So I walked on at San Francisco State. Mm-hmm. So my wrestling coach in high school was like, "Hey, go check out the campus. The coach wants to meet with you. You could check it out, right?" And he was like, "Hey, I'm not going to give you any money, but you can walk on, you can try out and stuff like that." And I was like, "All right, cool. Like, I'll do it. I'll come out to San Francisco." And the biggest thing for me was like my high school coach was like, "You just need to get out of this town. You need to get out of this small town and go somewhere. San Francisco's perfect for you. It's the skate mecca. It's, there's wrestling there. It's like, it's perfect for you, Wow. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, so I end up meeting Lars, going out there. I don't know really what I thought of him when I first kind of met him, as a high school kid, you're like, whoa, this is a college wrestling coach. Like, you're just big, googly eyed. You don't really know who they are, and you're just like, all right, well, he's got to be someone, he's the coach. Mm-hmm. So end up trying out for the team. Back then, the lowest weight class was 125 pounds. I wrestled in high school. I wrestled at 112 pounds.
Oh, shit.
So I had to bulk up a lot. I had to get really big. Go to the tryouts. I walk on. I'm doing all the tryouts. There's this guy, Curtis Sherkamp. He's already two-time All-American, right? And there's this guy, Pierre Bondoc, who was a state champ. I believe he took like second or third in nationals in high school as well. So it's like I got these two stacked guys before me in my weight class, right? Yeah. And it's like, all right, I gotta go through this hell of like I gotta prove myself to these guys. These guys already got a name for themselves. I don't. So I start going through it, doing the tryouts. Cuts are being made, and it comes down to like the last four guys, and Jensen brings me in his office and he's like, sits me down and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" Just a little conversation. He's like, I don't know what it is about you, but Curtis likes you. Curtis really likes you, so we're going to keep you. We're going to keep you on the team. I was like, what? Really? Like these guys that are like 10 times better than me, like me, they want me around. I'm like, all right, cool. And it turns out it's just because I wasn't afraid to back down from them. I wasn't afraid to go after them, right? Most of the people that came out for the team were like showing them too much respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you show someone too much respect, you're not going to perform the way you want to perform in wrestling, right? You're going to like back down. You're not going to go as hard. You're going to kind of have that fear in the back of your head of like, this guy's going to beat me anyways. Mm-hmm. I didn't care. I still had something to prove, I was like, you know what? I had such a shitty end of my senior year. Like I still got something to prove. So Jensen gave me the privilege of being able to wrestle in college, which, I'm indebted for that. But as my career in college went on, I kind of got like a little bittersweet relationship with him, mm-hmm. where it's like, yes, he gave me the opportunity to be on the team, but it's not like I can't really say I learned anything from him, mm-hmm. to be honest. Mm-hmm. Everything I really learned in college was from my peers, from mm-hmm. Curtis, from Bundock, Brian Tharp, Julian Perez, like all these. I can name a bunch of them. Naveed Bagheri was probably the biggest one. Like once I started living with these guys, mm-hmm. it was like they were the ones I was with all the time. They were the ones I was in the wrestling room with all the time. They were the ones I was with over summer in the wrestling room. And those are the guys I really learned from, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I believe it was like, I forget what year it was, but Jensen was like, "Hey, I don't get it, but everyone that you practice with, everyone that's your partner in the room, either ends up becoming a really good wrestler or they become an All-American, a national All-American in wrestling." They're like, "What is it about you?" And I was like, because I don't give a fuck, dude. I'm going out there to fuck them up. Like, you know what? Like, they're in my spot, and I want it.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, it's a battle. Like, the intensity from going from a high school wrestling room to a college wrestling room is, oh, man, the difference is tenfold. Like,
Oof.
like
Yeah.
how tough you wrestle in there. It's tough. They're in there to beat you up. They're in there to hurt you, you know, because it's like you're fighting for a spot. You know what I mean? You're fighting for that spot. Like, it doesn't matter who you are anymore. It just matters about who wins that match, right, in the wrestling room. So like I mentioned, right, the battles to compete in wrestling go on before you even get there. It's in the wrestling room. Yeah. You have to compete with your teammates before you even get a chance to step on the mat for the school, right? So there's been a lot of crazy battles, a lot of actual fist fights, and inside it got really competitive in the college room.
Wow.
Yeah, really, really competitive, where it's like you ended up hating your teammates, and then you have to go home and live with them in the house, you know, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But you love them to death, right? Because they're going through the same things that you're going through. They're going through all those tough runs, the tough workouts, the tough grueling practices, you know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah, we're at each other's throats in the room, but it's like we're best friends because we're going through the same shit.
Wars.
Yeah.
Yep. Wow. So in a sense, he was coaching through you guys, through his, how do you call it? His competitors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when I got there, Coach Jensen he was already fairly old, right? He could barely kind of like move his body, and like he had beat up knees and stuff like that. So it was more so like he would kind of guide us through practices and structure the practices. But for the most part, the real stuff that you learned was from your colleagues. And get this. So after my sophomore year, I actually got cut from the wrestling team.
At SF State.
At SF State.
Okay.
Yeah. So I get cut from the wrestling team. And I was mad. I was so mad again, you know, because I was like, that's what I went there for. And I still didn't get my shot. And so I started training just like I did in high school. I was like, you know what? I'm on my own again. I'm on my own. I can do this. Started training super hard, super hard. The year that I wasn't on the team, there's a weight room right next to the wrestling room. And they would all see me there every single day. They would hear me. They were like, dude, because they were my friends, dude. They were my friends for 2 years. And then I'm not on the team, and I live with them still. I still live with these guys. And they could hear me in the weight room going hard. They're like, man, Martin's crazy. I end up going to the tournament that our school hosts, and I ended up doing really well. I beat like this Boise guy that was supposed to beat me, D1 kid. And like I see the look on Jensen's face. I'm like, oh man, I fucked up. I should have kept this kid, you know, because of how hard it's the hard work, right? Because he cut me, and I was still always the first one in the runs, the first one doing everything, the first one in the wrestling room. Like I would be sleeping in the wrestling room. They'd wake me up right before practice. Be like, all right, let's practice.
Wow,
you know.
dude.
So like I had something really, really to chase after again, which kind of put the fuel under the fire. And that year, Mauricio Wright, national champ for San Francisco State, ended up coming to coach that year. No one was in the wrestling room over summer, so that's where I actually got to learn how to wrestle like a college wrestler. He's like, hey, no one else is in here besides you. Let me teach you some stuff. You know?
Yeah.
And given this guy's like huge, right? Like breaking like 2-something, legs of a tree trunk, right? And I'm over here trying to take this guy down. And I'm like, I'm like 140 at the time or something like that. Like,
wow. And so I'm not sure I know how a jiu-jitsu class is structured. I'm not sure how a wrestling class is structured. Is it similar? Where somebody shows a move or is it?
No.
Because I've been on a wrestling team very briefly. And nobody was showing us moves. It was just like, all right, here you go. Like, here's the best guy at the school. We were in the same weight class. See what you could do. Yeah. I couldn't do shit. I didn't know he had been wrestling for like 3 or 4 years, and I was just like, so is it the same way?
It depends on the coach and the program and stuff, but no, it's completely different, right? You get in there, either you're lifting or running before practice or after practice. you get to practice, you do your warm-ups, you warm up, and then you drill, right? In college, you already know what you're doing, but even it's kind of the same in high school. You drill, you do the moves, you warm up, and that's about an hour of warming up and hard drilling and getting the sweat. And then they'll show a little bit of technique, like this is the move of the day, right? And then you'll drill that for a bit, drill, and then once that drilling's done, then you have wrestling, where it's live wrestling. We would wrestle live for about like 45 minutes.
Fuck.
And that's tough.
100%?
100% going. Like, I would go through maybe like 4 or 5 different t-shirts during practice just because you're sweating so much, right? Like, it gets to the point to where like the mats is like, it's like a swimming pool.
Yeah.
It's just sweat all over the mat. And you're to the brink of exhaustion, right? And you're pushing yourselves. It's very competitive, and you don't want to give up points. You don't want to give up moves. So you're still pushing hard against your teammates, because it's like, well, if coach is watching me and he's seeing me get beat up, you know what I mean? I may lose out on opportunities to wrestle. So you're going hard. And then once that's all done, then you do another like 30 to 40 minutes of strength and conditioning stuff, where you're like hard sprints, just completely gassing yourself out, sprawls, up, down. Sprawls are kind of like burpees.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then you're doing like million push-ups, million sit-ups, right? It's just constant. And it's 3 hours of just hard work, hard work.
What's the difference between collegiate wrestling and high school wrestling? Because you said the guy that you spent the summer with taught you how to compete as a collegiate wrestler.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say was the biggest difference?
So in high school, you can get away with being very athletic, right? You could be athletic, you could be strong, you could be quick, you could have a certain attribute about you that will allow you to kind of move on and be successful. In college, you have to be all around. You have to be strong. You have to be quick. You have to be very, very smart is the other thing. Because think about it, all these other guys know the same moves you know, right? So wrestling is all about control, positioning, and deception. And what I mean by deception is you kind of have to maneuver yourself in a way that it makes your opponent think that you're doing one thing, but really you're doing something else.
Right.
So like, if I'm right in front of you and I'm over here pulling on your left arm, right? You think I'm going to the left, but I'm setting you up to go to the right, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm pulling on your left side, which is your right arm, you're going to pull that right arm back, which is going to open up your other side because your weight is going to be shifting. So it's a lot of like push, pull, kind of like faking one way, getting their feet off balance and creating an angle that allows you to get into someone's personal space and to actually be able to grab their legs, right? Because if you have someone big and strong and they know how to react, like you're not going to be able to just like, I'm going to grab you, dive for your legs and take you down. No, it takes like 3 or 4 or 5 different movements that will allow me just to even get in onto your leg. Now, once I get in onto your leg, that's a whole different battle. Now I got to do 4 or 5 different movements to take you down with that leg, right? And then once I get you down, it's still not over. Now I got to figure out how to actually keep you down, control you, and position myself that you can't get out or turn my move against me, right? So it's a lot of like deception and play. It's a huge chess game. It's a huge mental chess game. So you have to be very, very smart with how you're moving your body in comparison to your opponent.
Wow. I love that.
And to people, it looks like nothing's going on, which is funny.
It just looks like it looks brutal. It looks erratic. But it's also beautiful too. If you know what you're looking for, it's very artistic in the movements and the body positions and, oh wow, the sun's sunny.
Oh, I love it.
This is awesome, dude. But yeah, so I wanted to also ask you how do you think skateboarding prior to wrestling set you up mentally?
Okay. Yeah. So I think the way skateboarding set me up mentally was because when you're skateboarding, right, it's not like you're doing things yes, you're with your friends and you're doing stuff and you can teach each other, but like in order for you to progress as a skateboarder and learn tricks, you got to do it all on your own, right? It's not like, and that's how wrestling is. It's an individual sport. Yes, you're a part of a team, but you're out there by yourself. So you kind of have to figure things out for yourself. So with skateboarding, that was my only outlet as a kid, right? So it was like I would go to the park, as soon as I get out of school till sundown, and I would see all these older guys doing these tricks. And it's not like they're like, hey, this is how you do it. It's like, all right, I'm going to sit here and try many different things. I'll sit there and try like a kickflip for hours and hours and hours. And even though I'm landing it, it may not be the way I want it to look like or feel like. So then you keep sticking at it. And then you kind of learn that discipline of like, okay, it takes repetition. It takes time to be able to do these maneuvers, right?
Yeah.
Especially with skateboarding, because you want it to look cool. You want it to be stylistic, but yet you want to be able to actually do things that no one else is really doing. And with wrestling, you have to be able to get into the mindset of doing those repetitious things and know that even though you're not doing it now, like if you put in the time and the effort, you'll eventually get to that point.
I love that. That's what I just realized, that whether you're a part of a sport or not, skateboarding in that sense gives kids that mentality that yes, to get good at something, it's gonna take repetition.
Yeah.
And you're doing it not in front of a screen with a video game controller in your hand, which there's nothing wrong with, of course, but you're outside, you're using your body, and you're failing, you're falling. Dude, that's so cool, man.
And as a coach, it's interesting to see the younger kids going through that, right? Especially now with social media and the internet, everything like at the fingertips for these kids. Their attention span has kind of gone down a little bit, I think. Trying to keep them focused on one task is very hard, right? Because if on Instagram, you look at something, 15 seconds, boom, on to the next. 15 seconds, on to the next, right? Now it's like, all right, how do I keep these kids focused for two and a half hours?
That's perfect that you mentioned that, because earlier in the conversation you mentioned the retention rate for athletes over the course of a season in a wrestling room, it dwindles towards the end.
Yes.
So as a coach now, especially for one of the most, like we mentioned earlier, prestigious high schools in the United States, publicly, is what types of people do you see it attracting the wrestling room?
So
season?
that's a very great question, actually, because you would think like, oh, you're gonna get the people that stick with wrestling are going to be these amazing athletes, or they're going to be like the football guys that come out are going to be the ones that stay, and stuff like that. But really, it's the ones that you don't actually foresee sticking it out that stick it out, right? It's usually the ones that that kind of aren't the most athletic, or like the ones that don't seem like a wrestler that are going to develop into a wrestler, right? It's funny because we'll have. So this year, right, this season, we had, I think it was about 10 football players come out. We had 2 stay. That was it. Only 2 of the football players stayed, right? And it's usually the type of kids that are searching for something but don't really know what they're looking for, and they don't have, like, a physical outlet yet, right? Because the football kids are like, this is too hard. I'm going to go back to football. Or I'm going to play basketball or something like that. But then you run into these kids that are usually very quiet, very intrinsic, right? They don't really speak much. Those are the ones that end up sticking around, which is interesting. And for me, and I think with even a lot of my college colleagues, these kids have had like a past trauma in their life, right? They've had something that has happened to them that they don't quite understand, and then they get into wrestling, and it becomes this place of where it's like, I don't need to talk, I don't need to like show anyone anything. I'm able to like physically express myself in a way that it allows me to deplete myself of all of this energy and depletes my train of thought, where it's like, now all I'm thinking about is survival. Mm-hmm. All I'm thinking about making it through this last sprint. All I'm thinking about is not getting my face pummeled right now.
Yep. I like that you said depletion, because when I got older, I started noticing that, okay, let's say after a hard work night at the kitchen, you're depleted. Like, you're talking wrestling room. And I'm thinking, okay, I've been like that at a kitchen where sweat is just all night. It's hot.
Yeah.
It's pouring out of your body. You worked in restaurants too, I'm sure?
I've been around a little bit.
Yeah. It's the end of the night. You're just depleted.
Yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu, you're depleted.
Yes.
Running, you're depleted. And I can't help but tie mental health to those states of depletion.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I don't think we really think about that as a society, in that sense of your body depends on you to exert all of this trauma or stress and like get it all out of your body and deplete yourself, because in the end of these sessions, how do you feel?
You feel amazing, right?
Yeah.
You're even though your body is drained and you're like, ooh, I'm sore, I'm tired, right? But you get this feeling of the sense of completion almost. It's almost like a cleanse.
Totally.
You're cleansing yourself of these things that have been burdening you for such a long time, right? And again, like how Tom Brown was mentioning, we get into things that allow us to kind of avoid or get away from things, and then once we stop doing that, all of those emotions or the bad stuff kind of comes back. But with like wrestling, and it does the physical and the mental for you. So then once you are completely done, you're just like in the state of like nothing is worse than that it's like none of your problems matter. Like the feelings of hurt kind of go away, because it's like you're so drained and so depleted that all your body is thinking about is recovering. Right?
Yeah.
Like, all right, I need some water. Like, oh man, I just want to breathe right now.
Yeah.
Your lungs are expanding, your lungs are on fire, your muscles are aching, your forearms are burning, and you're just like, oh man, I just want to breathe. I just need a second to breathe. Give me a second.
Totally.
You know, like, whew. And like that, all you're thinking about is breathing.
That's a very great point.
All you're thinking about is breathing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're just back to your basic needs.
Yes.
I remember going into a jiu-jitsu gym for the first time. One of my buddies brought me in, and it was way back in the days before I had even gotten into shape. And I was so exhausted that all I wanted to do was open the door and get a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And that's funny how you mentioned that too. It's like you do get to those states where I just need to breathe. I need some water. I just need to care for myself at this point.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so crazy, but also beautiful at the same time. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, most definitely. And then that's where you start to build the mental toughness, right? Which is what everyone talks about a lot in wrestling. And that's the biggest thing that transfers over to, for me at least, and I'm sure it transfers over to a lot of these kids' lives that I'm coaching as well, because, you know, they start to develop this layer in their head of like, yes, this is going on in my life, right? But you have the strength and the will to positively reinforce yourself that, you know, I'm going through this, but I'm going to make it. No matter what I do, I'm going to find a way to survive. Like in the end, like what I'm stressing over doesn't really matter too much, right? It's the sense of like training your brain to be in uncomfortable situations and not freak out or flip out about it. So you're able to slow things down a little bit. You're able to process things a little bit more. And the more you train and train and train your body mentally and physically, like those two go hand in hand, right? You can train your body as much as you want. You can train your mind as much as you want. But if you don't train them together, right, then it's going to be very hard to kind of find ways that allow you to kind of how do I want to say this? To not necessarily like trigger, but allow yourself to kind of like structure your thoughts and what is the next step for you to move past the obstacle that's in front of you, right? Because we kind of get tied up in our thoughts and our brains a lot, especially like if you're a very intrinsic person. Then you get all this mess in your head, and then now you're getting all this stress and this anxiety, and you're just like flipping out about everything in your head. But it's like, that's why like people talk about like that runner's high and stuff too. It's like, you know, I'm going to go for a run and clear my mind type of thing, right? So that's what kind of allows you to develop like this sense of like toughness in your mind. And you're like, you know what, if I can push myself and my body to these limits, then I can handle what's going on in my head.
Right. Totally. And that's an important point to make, especially when you make that point. I think about how people are, I think the statistic is 7 out of 10 people are on some kind of pill.
Yeah.
Many people I know are on anti-anxiety medicine, antidepressants, but the connection between mind and body and pushing yourself to those points where you're actually forced to tell yourself positive things.
Yeah.
Like, I could do this. I can get through this. I think that might be what's missing in a wide range of people's lives. I mean, you think about like mental health, obesity, diabetes, and all these things, and people that don't have the active lifestyles, but maybe are carrying trauma with them. It just goes to those things. It goes to those drugs. It goes to substances. And having programs like wrestling at schools, invaluable.
Yeah.
You can't put a price on that. But when you mentioned earlier about bringing people back, and people's attention spans. I mean, you're a leader now. You're a coach.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you get them back?
Oh man, you can start to see it in their body language, right? You can see it in their eyes, which comes back to that crazy story of the guy in the truck, you know, cornering me, right?
Yeah.
Like your eyes are the window to your soul, right? And you look at a kid's eyes, you look at their body movement, and you can tell when they're not into something or when they're like out of it. And anyone in general, right? It doesn't have to be a kid.
Sure.
But with the youth, like it happens a lot quicker where their attention span goes quick. And so as a coach, you have to be able to pick up those signs, right? And you start to see, okay, like they're falling off track. It's time to move on, or let's give them a break, or like, let's do something fun. And then we'll come back to what we were working on. Right. And so with coaching, you kind of have to structure a practice that is, especially in wrestling, right? Because it takes really long time to get these moves down. You have to structure a practice where it's fun, it's engaging, it changes a lot so that their attention span is in it, right? And they don't start to get like goofing off and start doing stuff in the corner, because that's where kids start getting hurt, you know, because then they're like not paying attention. Someone falls on someone, they break their ankle or something like that. And then when they're engaged as well, they're in it more energetically as well, right? Because then it's like, if you're not paying attention, you're not into it, like you're just half-assing things and you're not in it with your mind, then that's why people quit stuff and like get over wrestling and stuff, because it's hard for them to pay attention. And wrestling, like there's an old wrestling style that a lot of coaches do, and they stick to this structure and they're not willing to like change and adapt. And as long as and that's what wrestling is all about, is everything changes very quickly. I take a shot or I try to take you down, you maneuver a different way I don't expect. Now I have to counter that by maneuvering differently. So you look at the kids in the room and you see how they're behaving and see how they're acting, and then you have to change it right away and be like, all right, what do I have to do to keep these kids engaged? What do I need to do next so that they're actually being able to learn and having fun at the same time?
Yeah.
Because like kids, they especially in wrestling, right, they get that fear of missing out, because like, oh well, all my friends are doing this, and then that's when they start quitting, right? Because like their friends are talking about all the fun stuff they're doing, and all the events that are going on. But I'm over here busting my butt for who knows what, you know, and like coach is very tough and yelling at me and stuff.
So yeah, how well, you just make it fun, and yeah, that's important.
Yeah,
because I started coaching basketball this year, and that was the one thing that was like, you have to make it fun. Yeah, because you don't want kids to quit. You want them to stick around for the whole season.
Exactly.
And the ones that do stick around for the whole season, I noticed on your social media feed, man, you're coaching guys and girls to state tournaments.
Yes. Yeah.
What that's amazing. That's
thank you.
To coach somebody to that level. And can you talk about some of the changes that you've seen in kids?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So so usually as a freshman or a sophomore, right, still very new, and they're still trying to figure themselves out. They're figuring out their bodies. They're still growing physically, developing mentally as a young adult. Yeah. Usually it's around the junior year, the third year of wrestling, that things start to click for them, and you could see that change. It's usually their junior year, right, if they started as a freshman. But once you can see the changes quick. So I have this one girl, right? She's kind of like, kind of in it. Wasn't like, I didn't know if she was going to be a great wrestler. Her brother wrestled as well. And she's good. She's good. And she doesn't realize how good she was. And she made it to the state tournament, right? Qualifies for state. So she makes it to the section finals, right? And she had no idea how she made it there. She was just like, well, I'm here in the finals. Like, this is crazy, And she makes it to the state tournament this past year, and she wins her first match. She's like, whoa. Wow. Like, whoa, but still kind of like doesn't feel like she belongs there, right? And then after that season, she got a chance to like sit and look back at kind of her accolades and what she accomplished, and she's like, whoa. And I do a lot of goal structuring with them, right? I have them set their goals in the beginning of the season. Oh, nice. I have them restructure their goals halfway through the season. I have them write down how they're going to achieve those goals, right? And like steps they can take every day. Like even before practice, I'm like, hey, what's your goal today? What are you trying to do today? And I asked her what her goals were at the end. She was like, I wanted to win a match at CCS. I'm like, what do you mean? You were in the finals. What do you mean? Win a match at CCS. And then I was like, well, you were in the finals at CCS. Now you went to state. And I was like, what was your goal for state? And she's like, well, again, it was just to win a match. And after I mentioned to her, I'm like, hey, look, like out of the entire state of California in your weight class, you are in the top 20 out of every single girl in the entire state of California. And it kind of hit her. And she was like, whoa, like, wow, And I was like, so now, like, this is where you restructure your goals now. This is where you take a look at where you're at. You can actually take a step away because the wrestling season's over. Yeah. And you don't, there's no stress of going into a tournament. And she's like, all right. And then boom, very next day, hey coach, when's practice? Are we practicing over summer? Like, what can I do to get better? Like, instant change, because that realization hit her of like, wow, I this is something for me, and you realize it, and it's like you can see that flip really quick in the kids, and it's awesome. That's probably like the most gratifying thing as a coach that you can see is like, okay, all of this hard work that I've been putting in for these kids, because they see me wrestling's tough. If we're not competing on Saturday, we're practicing Monday through Saturday. 2.5, 3 hour practices, right? I see these kids almost more than they see their parents, right? Yep. So then they start to you see their changes, and you could see it when it hits them, and they become motivated, they become into it. So now she's all about it. She's trying to practice. We actually went to a tournament this last weekend, right? She wins every match. We're in the tournament. She goes to her last match in the finals for freestyle. Freestyle's a little more laid back than high school. She's wrestling the state champ.
Wow,
right?
Dude.
Comes out, she's wrestling the state champ. But it's not like the state tournament because it's the freestyle tournament. She's so relaxed and so chill. And I'm just like, she even commented to me. She's like, coach, like, everyone's so relaxed here. The referees are making mistakes and the coaches are laughing about it. And I'm like, yeah, because it's off season, no, everyone's here to get experience and stuff.
Wow.
She ends up taking down the state champ twice. She still lost, but ends up taking down the state champ twice. And that was another moment for her of like, wow, I'm right there, So then now you see like the change in their mental state of like them going from like a kid to a young adult, which is amazing, right? And now I don't have to tell her to structure goals. I don't have to tell her to be like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing today? What are you focusing on? She's doing that herself now, right? And that's something you try to develop in these young adults because, and I stress this to them a lot. I'm like, look, once you get to college, your parents aren't going to be there for you as much, right? You're kind of on your own now. And now you have to figure out the world on your own. You have to figure out how you want to lead your life, right? Your parents have guided you up to this point, but there's going to come, like I tell them, I'm like, there's going to come a point in your life where you're going to have to tell your parents, no, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
That's what you want for me, but this is what I want. So I try to teach them that even though they're young, like you control your life. You're the one that controls where you're going to go with your life.
Right.
And it stems back from me not having that outlet of someone guiding me, right? Like how I mentioned, my high school coach became that outlet for me. So now they're like, all right, like I'm my own person. I can make my own decisions. And now they're structuring a life that allows them to teach themselves how to grow rather than depending on someone how to teach them to grow.
Dude, yeah, that's amazing. Valuable, super valuable. In a way, you're just describing what happened to you.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, yeah. Right? And again, that comes back to that me paying it forward. And like I mentioned, wrestling just keeps drawing me back in. And after like the skating, I think it hit me where it's like, yeah, I love skateboarding. I have a passion for skateboarding. But there comes a point in your life where it's like you have to accept your past and who you were as a past person and let that person go, right? And everyone talks about, if you truly love someone, let them go, right? Think about that for yourself, right? If you truly love yourself, allow that past version of you go and become the next version of you.
Yeah, I love that. Heck yeah. Dude. I'm just letting that sink in for a little bit. I love that.
And we tend to forget, and then it comes back, and we forget, and it comes back, and like the universe doesn't scream at you and be like, this is what you need to do. It pokes and pries at you and gives you these little hints, right? In life, it really comes down to make a choice and go for it, right? And I feel like everyone thinks, I have this destiny, or I need to be doing this, or I need to do that. It's like you can literally do anything, or you can manifest any destiny that you want. It's just about making a choice. It's like, what choice do you want to make? And that comes down to what you truly value for yourself and what you truly value in life and in your life and what you value for the others around your life, right? And then you'll start to structure yourself of like, okay, these are the decisions I need to make. These are the choices that I need to make. Now it's not like, I don't know what choices I know this is the choice I'm making. I don't feel like there's a right or wrong answer to it, right? I don't feel like things are really necessarily good or bad, right? You don't know whether something's going to be good or bad down the line. It's like, I got injured. I hurt my ankle. I hurt my shoulder, right? In my head, I'm like, this is bad. This is not, I shouldn't have made those choices.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't have gone that route, I wouldn't be coaching. I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing now, right? So was it necessarily good or bad? I can't answer that question.
Yeah.
But really, what it comes down to is make a choice, go for it, and no matter what, you're going to end up somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude. And it makes me think, I've been learning recently that it's important to have a sense of humor. I mean, I've always had a sense of humor, but, not to take yourself too seriously. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you went down the list of all the things that happened to you, and I'm thinking of all the things that happened to me. And it's funny when you think about it. It's like during those times, they are the darkest moments. But it's just like, how funny is that like I'm going for this goal and then you get sidetracked in this certain way. It's almost like it was written. It was supposed to be that way. Because then you start thinking of where you are now. And if you did take yourself too seriously, would you have been open to that? Maybe not. Yeah. Like, I used to think that I was like this, I wanted to be this well-respected chef that worked at all these like nice places. And then all of a sudden, I didn't want that anymore. But here I am, I'm at a school. I never thought I would be working with kids. But here I am just like breaking that comfort zone every day. And like, okay, this is going to require a different part of me, a different part of my personality that I'm not used to having. But like I said, if I took myself too seriously and if I was so rigid in holding my present self and not letting... Dude, what a great way to say that is like, if you really do love yourself, then let the ego go. Let the ego go. Yeah. Let a new one come in.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
And it's a vicious cycle. It comes back, and then you have to reevaluate yourself and stuff. And that's why I teach all these kids about restructuring, like make goals and restructure them and keep going back to the things that you wanted to achieve. And if they weren't necessarily structured in with the things that you truly valued, then restructure it and then keep going. Because no matter what, like it's gonna be like that your entire life, right? You're gonna constantly be, all right, I need to do this now to move forward. I need to do this certain action because I value this, and your values change as you get older.
Where did you learn that restructuring practice? I mean, I know it's so basic, right?
Yeah. Actually, so in college, right, I read this book. It's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Love that book.
And that was probably the one book that really resonated with me in college. And it's all about goal structuring, but it's more so about like, they have like this these 4 quadrants that you write down.
Yeah.
The things that you're doing, and you write down what's the most important to you, what are things that you actually need to get done now with your life and stuff like that. And it kind of allows you to take a look at your life in a broader aspect and look at the things that you're actually doing from day to day and be like, okay, these are what I really need to do if I want to move on in my life towards this. Like if I want to become like this great wrestling coach, I need to do this, right? And I got into wrestling as a wrestling coach thinking like, I'm going to make this badass wrestling team. I'm going to have all these kids doing all this stuff. And then I realized like, I enjoy more so the process of seeing them like learn about themselves and develop themselves. Right. So it's like, and I try to tell them, I'm like, look, I don't care if you win or lose, right? If you go out on that mat and you wrestle as hard as you can and give it everything you got, I'm going to be the happiest coach in the world.
That's great.
I'll be the happiest coach in the world.
That's great. And I can attest, especially this year, it's a great feeling from the beginning of the season towards the end of the season when everything that you're teaching may not be perfect, but it's clicking more than it was in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I swear that I was the assistant to this other coach who was a lot more experienced than I was. They were running plays on their own, making decisions on their own. And it's very uplifting. It really is uplifting. It does stop being about you. Maybe it is a bit about you, and
just
that's okay. But for the most part, you see the value that a giving of yourself is to these kids who, it's a blank slate, man. Yeah. And they deserve a fresh shot. They deserve a fair shot.
Yeah.
And it's such a valuable thing of all the things that you've learned, especially as a wrestler.
Yeah.
And all the things that you picked up that weren't about wrestling and they were just about fucking life in general.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man. Can't say enough about that.
And the hard thing about a coach too is like, as being a coach is like, you're teaching all these kids and it's draining sometimes, right?
Right.
And yeah, you get those one-offs where it's like you see their changes, you see them developing, you see them going, right? But then there's those kids where it's like they don't understand necessarily the concepts that you're teaching them yet, right? And it's hard because you don't get that instant gratification as a coach of like, yeah, I'm changing these kids' lives. It's like some way, somewhere down the road, it's going to click for them.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, they're just going to be like, you know what? I understand what coach was teaching me, right? Now, I'm not going to be there for that. They may not ever bring it up to me, right? So my coach, my high school coach, he ended up applying for like this award thing, right? And I ended up writing this letter about how he changed my life and all these things that he did for me and stuff that he didn't really know he was doing for me. And then like after he read it and like saw it, like I think it blew his mind, you know, where it was like, because I was dealing with stuff that he didn't even know I was dealing with, but yet he guided me through it, right?
How many years later was this?
This was after college.
After college, you wrote a high school.
I wrote a letter for my high school wrestling coach. He ended up becoming the principal of our high school now.
Oh shit!
Which is crazy, right?
Wait, for Lowell or
for Pioneer Valley High School?
Okay.
So down south. But there was stuff that I was going through that he didn't even realize he was kind of like helping me with, and that I was going through. But just because he was there and he was putting the effort, right? Because like I seen the work that he was putting in, and I always see he was always drained, he was always tired, he's always stressed, you know. And he was working so hard for these kids, and like it's hard as a coach to be like, man, is all this really worth it? Like draining myself like this really worth it for these kids? And in the long run, yeah, but sometimes too you got to realize like you got to take care of yourself as a coach too.
Definitely.
Because I went through some trauma as a kid where it was like I was abused sexually as a child, and like coping with that, like I didn't understand what I even really went through until I was like an adult and in college, and I thought back about it and I was like, whoa, like that's why I am the way I am. Like I went to like after college, after wrestling, so going back to like Lars Jensen, right? And going back to the college wrestling, I like didn't make the team. I made the team. I went back. I ended up beating the starter for the number one spot, right? But he was paying him more money. So I didn't actually get to start at all for break the lineup for college wrestling. So I was kind of just the practice dummy, you know? And it was eating me up a lot. Like it was eating me up a lot when I finished my college career. I was like, that's why I was like, I want nothing to do with wrestling. Like I got to college, like I hate it now. I thought I was going to be this amazing college wrestler, and didn't end up happening, right? And then I ended up getting this tech job and working in an office, like you mentioned, right? But that was not the atmosphere for me. I started getting, like, everyone partied. If you wanted to move up the ranks in this tech company, you had to, like, schmooze your supervisor with all these drinks and go out with them and stuff, right? So I ended up going on this, like, bender of, like, yeah, even though I was making a lot of money at this tech company, like, I wasn't getting that physical outlet that I needed that was allowing me to actually have a very healthy life. So all those past traumas started coming up, right? And I was like, what is this feeling I'm feeling, man? Like, what is this feeling? I end up going to the doctor, and turns out I got very high anxiety and depression. And so I tried to reach out to, like, maybe I'll talk to a therapist and stuff. I'll try to talk to a therapist, started reaching out, and it's like, I talked to one person, then I got to talk to another person, then I got to find another, and then like so a few months later, I'm like, man, how do people find a fucking therapist? I can't even find a therapist. This is making me even more anxious and depressed. Like, I can't do this. And wrestling drew me back. Like, I went back to wrestling, and then like it all went away. You know, and it was like taking that step away from like wrestling and like going through that whirlwind spiral down. Allowed me to realize, you know, that wrestling was and still is that outlet that allows me to channel those feelings that I'm feeling inside. It's hard to express your emotions and your feelings, right? Especially when you don't have someone in your life that says like, yo, it's cool to cry. You know what I mean? It's like, cool, go ahead and cry. Like allow yourself to let that out. And when you don't have that and you fall back on like something like wrestling, you know, it draws you back in and stuff.
Isn't that funny though, that You can go throughout your whole life feeling that, yeah, I gotta tough it out. I gotta be a man.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a fucking pussy because you don't do this, you don't do that.
Yeah.
But all you really need to do is just really express yourself in a very honest way.
Yes.
Which is what wrestling gave you, or gives people.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it could be so intense, you can't put it into language.
Exactly.
It has to be exerted primally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've been thinking of this idea of what was the world before language? How did people emote? And because of language, do we hold on to things a lot longer than animals do? Animals live in the present, at least we think.
Yeah.
But imagine if language wasn't there. You would have to do some shit. You would have to maybe wrestle or throw a rock at something.
Yeah.
You know?
Express yourself physically for that other entity that's around you, right? Let's say it's like a monkey, or like us as human beings that don't necessarily have a language, but it's like, I'm trying to express to you what I'm trying to relay this information. How do I do it? I got to do it physically.
And thankfully, kids have skateboarding, dancing, poetry, rapping, making beats, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, just to get all that out of their system. And dude,
exactly. So now that's why I'm like, you know what? Like, even if I don't get that immediate reward from teaching these kids, like, I know I'm doing something. I know I'm doing something for them.
And it's cool because I had no idea. Now that I'm putting two and two together, when you and I met, in the trajectory of your life, you were going through that transition after college.
Yes.
And I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, here's this kid, like, you maybe mentioned wrestling, of course, because we're getting to know each other like once or twice.
Yeah.
And you have every right to throw it in everybody's face, like, hey, I've been this, this and that, but you were really humble about it. And you never really talked about it unless somebody asked about it.
Yeah, no, a lot of people didn't like. So after college, right? And like, I ended up getting into the skateboard scene and that culture, which was fun and stuff like that. Nobody knew how into wrestling it was. Nobody even knew I wrestled. They just saw me as like another skater kid or another skater dude in SF.
Wow. Man, thank you for sharing all this stuff. I was going to ask you, man, like, and you kind of answered it on its own. I'm just going to share with you, like, where your work ethic comes from. Is it your parents? Is it your peers?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it kind of answered it on its own, but yeah, if you could.
Well, the work ethic, to be honest, comes from my mom, to be honest. Like, okay, so think about it, like, my mom, she has kids at a very young age, right? Very, very young age. My father ended up having my older brother is my stepbrother, right? So he has a different mother. My mom met him and actually started taking care of my older brother when he was like 2 or 3 or something like that, very, very young age. And my mom at the time was like 18, something like that, right? Like my mom, I'm 33. I'm 33. My mom just turned 52. Like,
shit, 20,
think about that. 19 years old.
Yeah.
My mom had me when she was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And she was already taking care of my older brother, which is 3 years older than me. Right.
Which sounds like it's not her child that she was taking care of.
But she raised him like her own child, right? And then my dad ends up getting hurt. So then now my dad's disabled. He can't work, right? He broke his back. So my dad broke his back and he can't work. So he's just chilling at home. My mom's working 2 jobs, taking care of my older brother, me, and my younger brother, right? My mom would do all of that, come home, make us dinner, do the dishes, clean the house, like do all of this stuff, right? And like, when I got older and I thought about it, I was like, damn, my mom is a beast,
yeah,
bro.
Right?
Like, I was like, if you want to see someone that has mental toughness, look at my mom, bro. The stuff that she goes through, right? Like, to be able to do that. And you'll meet her and you'll be like, man, she's so nice. She's so happy all the time. She's smiling all the time. Like, she's a very loving and caring person, right? And the sad thing about it, too, is, like, my family kind of takes advantage of that. Like, her siblings and stuff like that. They take advantage of it, right? they ask for something, my mom does it right away for them, you know, and it's like there's no love given back there to her a lot, you know, which makes it very, very difficult. And what the great thing was, too, is like, even though my older brother had a different mom, my mom and his mom ended up becoming like really good friends.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, they realized like, hey, we're here for the kids, not like for all this dumb stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I learned all of that from my mom, right? So going into college, going into life, I was like, that's where I talked about, I was like, when you get into something, you have to have a very deep reason or a deep value in something that allows you to work so hard to do something, right? And everything that I did in the back of my mind is for my mom, is for my mother, right? I want to, like, going to college, I was like, man, I'm going to make all this money. I'm going to buy my mom a house. I'm going to do all this stuff for my mom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where that hard work ethic came from, because I idolize her a lot, like so much. And to this day, she's still working 2 jobs. She's still providing for the family. You know what I mean? She still tries to give me money and all this stuff, even when she has no money. And I'm like, I don't need anything. I don't need, what do you want for Christmas? Nothing. What do you want for your birthday? Nothing. Still gives me stuff, you know? And that's kind of where it came from. My mom, I feel, is the only person that I really feel like unconditional love from. And that's, I think, what allows me to kind of pull through the tough moments, because I think about my mom. I think about the love that she gives me, right? I know my dad loves me, but he doesn't show it in the same way. The way my dad will show me love is to be like, here's some weed or something.
Yeah.
Like, cool, here you go. But to think about like the stuff that my mom went through, especially raising 3 boys that are like wild. My neighbor called us the devil children. Yeah. Because we were so crazy. Like I was in and out. I was in and out of trouble until I found wrestling. You know what I mean? Like 7th grade, I went to juvenile hall for month and a half or something like that for vandalism, stuff like that, because we had no guidance. And then wrestling came into my life. My life completely changed. And that's where my hard work and my hard work ethic came from, was my mom.
Wow. Thankfully you found wrestling, man.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And now I'm into jiu-jitsu.
Yes. Yeah. Hell yeah. Essentially what you were saying is like critical thinking almost. Yeah. You've been given this like opportunity to like wrestle, and all these things happened cosmically, it sounds like. And you were talking about goal setting, and it's that's critical thinking, man. Yeah. If I do this, then I'll do this. All right. Set aside some time to reevaluate and then plan accordingly. It's not always going to be the same problem from beginning to end. Yeah. You eventually hit new problems, and then, that's fundamental, man. Yeah.
Well, and that's the kind of like what wrestling, right? Because you like learn these fundamentals. Like that's how I teach wrestling, is like, kids see all these crazy moves and like all this cool stuff, and they want to do all this crazy stuff. But I'm like, all this stuff that they're doing is based off of really basic movements and really fundamental things that are very simple concepts. Yeah. Right? That if you're able to apply them to it, you understand, right? That's why like people see sometimes like they call it a scramble, right? Where wrestlers, they get into a move and all of a sudden they're in this flurry of boom, 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 boom. And everyone's like, whoa, it's so fast, it's so intense. But in their heads, it's very slow, and it's very, like, methodical, and they're just sticking to a basic concept. They grab my leg here, and they're putting body pressure here. So I need to just put body pressure here. They put pressure here, and I'm just transferring different body pressures and movements, right, that allow me to, and it looks crazy. Yeah. It looks crazy, but it's all simple stuff that you learn from the basics of wrestling.
So what's your coaching style? What's your coaching philosophy? Do you have one yet?
I don't know if I have one yet, actually. That's a good one.
Are you a yeller, or are you more kind of like a low, soft-spoken?
I'm a little bit of both. Yeah. I'm a little bit of both, right? And again, that comes into play of, like we mentioned, it kind of goes into play of, like, reading the kids, right? Because everyone learns differently. So you kind of have to learn the kids' personalities when they're in there and see how they learn, right? Because even one of my girls, like she mentioned, she was like, hey, like you talk to Joe this way and like that. And it's like, I've never heard you talk that way. And I'm like, yeah, but that's how he takes information. So that's how I'm going to relay it to him, right? Yeah. you take it differently. Like with the girls, right? I know, like, I'll be a little bit more, not as stern, a little more soft-spoken. I can be actually be more detailed with them and go in depth with a lot of more stuff with them, and they understand it and they process it. With the boys, I gotta yell at them a little more. I gotta be a little bit more stern with them. I can't give them too much information at one time because it's gonna go one ear out the other.
Yeah.
Well, because think about it, like younger, for the kids, right? Girls develop their minds a lot faster than the boys do, right? So they understand a lot of the information easier and faster than the boys. And it's interesting, right? Because the girls actually develop their wrestling skills a lot faster than the boys do in the wrestling room. And it's very interesting to see, right? Because when I was in high school, there was like one girl on the wrestling team or something like that. Now it's like you have an entire team of girls that are wrestling.
That's awesome.
So.
That's awesome. And I can attest to that too, at least with jiu-jitsu, because whenever I look at movement, I feel like I want my movement to look like a girl's.
Yeah.
Because it's so much more smooth. It's more artistically. I don't know. I know not all girls roll or wrestle in that way.
Yeah.
But at least the ones I know are just more structurally sound. Aesthetically, it's just the angles are all. Even in a man's jiu-jitsu, I know we're getting a little man-women differential, but good jiu-jitsu looks like it just flows structurally good. It doesn't have to be a man or a woman.
Exactly.
How do you deal?
Well, that comes into like how you maneuver your body weight and transference of positioning, right? And like you got to think about it. Everyone's body structure is different, whether you're a man or a woman or whatever you want to identify as, right? But in a general sense, like biologically, women have a wider hips, wider base there, right? Their center of gravity is a little bit lower in their hips rather than a man's, right?
We're more top heavy. Yeah.
Top heavy, more brute, more like about strength. They're a lot more flexible and right. Their body structure is a little bit different, which kind of caters to how you maneuver yourself. But even like body structure in like being tall, being lanky, being big, you know, how dense your bones are, like what you're eating and how you treat yourself. If you're working on mobility for your body, then you'll actually be able to maneuver differently and stuff, right? So it depends on like how you run your life too.
Yeah, and one of the things I just love as somebody who's always been an observer of athletes and how athletes move is you start seeing people's personalities come out in the way they move and how they roll, especially in the most relaxed settings. I don't know, like, you know, the playful jokester is going to be a little bit more playful when they roll. There's like goofy people that are very spazzy and very awkward moving. And
it's hard to roll with those ones sometimes.
Yeah. Very unpredictable. Very unpredictable. Yeah, dude. How do you deal with somebody that's not motivated? If you ever came across somebody like that.
Oh, a lot of the time, right? And it depends, right? So if they're already an existing wrestler and I know they know how to wrestle or anything like that and they're unmotivated, you kind of have to, that's the biggest thing is like, you're a sports coach, but you're technically like a life coach, a therapist, a counselor for them, right? And the biggest thing is like, that's what I mean, like when you pay attention to their personalities, their moods, right? So day to day, it's different. And you start to learn when something's going on in their personal life where it's like, okay, something's going on with them. So I'll notice it. I'll go about my daily stuff, right? And then I'll pull them to the side. Like, hey, how you doing? You know, like, what's going on? I noticed you're not the same today. This is going on. And if they bring it up, they bring it up. If not, I'm like, okay, hey, you know, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. Let's talk about it. If not, like, you know, I'm going to give you your space. I'll allow you to have your space, right? And then that's when they'll start to open up to you, and then you start to get inside of like who they really are, right? And then that really gets to teach you you know, how to keep that motivation for them and how to keep them engaged, right? Because like you got to think about it, like these, especially like people that are in sports and stuff, like they have lives outside of the sport, you know, and you don't necessarily know what's going on outside other than what's going on inside your wrestling room or your basketball court or something like that. Like some kids, you know, they work because they don't have one of the parents is gone, or, you know, some of the kids are bullied and stuff. I have one girl, you know, they tell you why they joined the wrestling team and stuff like that. And I had them write down stuff, and one of them was like, well, my friends call me fat. Like, they think I'm fat. And, like, she's not wrestling to wrestle. She's wrestling to lose weight, you know? So she has a different, like, motivation. So to motivate them to actually want to succeed in wrestling rather than just be like, yo, I'm here to lose weight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, now you gotta dive into, like, who they are as a person. And be like, okay, like, let me learn about you and figure out, like, what's really going on with your life and how can I allow you to be successful, whether that's in wrestling or not, whether it's somewhere else in your life, right? Because you just want them to be like a decent human being that's a successful member of society, right?
Yeah.
You want them to lead a happy life rather than going through a life of like misery and just doing shit because like you're supposed to do it. Yeah, it's cool how you build relationships with your athletes, you know, which is fun. But then also at the same time, you got to know where to draw the line as a coach.
That's where I feel I'm still trying to learn that. And I like how you said you pull them aside, because I'm thinking of one player in mind that they're just not there. They're it just looks like they're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And I've been there before.
Yeah.
I've known people like that, and part of me wants to pull them aside, but also part of me is just maybe this is not the season for that yet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is tough.
It depends on how strong your relationship is with them.
Right.
Right. Because even though like I was in high school and like my high school coach did all that stuff for me, it's not like he necessarily pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, what's going on?
Sure.
Why are you like this?" You know what I mean? It's like it's like, oh, he understands like, okay, there's something up with this kid. I'm just gonna make sure he's cool.
When you feel like, damn, I gave it my fucking all.
Yeah.
And it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to turn out. Even now, how do you deal with those things now?
It's still a tough one, right? It's like you kind of have to find a way to deal with it, and you kind of constantly find new ways to deal with that. And it's like, I try to teach my kids as well to like, I'm like, hey, like set a really high goal. And it's like, it's better to set a really high goal and not achieve that goal than to set a really low goal and not achieve that goal, right? Yeah. Like, I'd rather fall short of something really huge than something that's a little bit mediocre, right? But dealing with that, like, emotionally is hard, right? So you kind of have to allow yourself. That's the biggest thing that I've learned too, and I'm still kind of learning, is allowing yourself to be submersed in that feeling at that moment and accept it. Just be like, you know what? Like, I failed. I achieved. I was working so hard for this goal and I'm feeling sad. Feel sad, dude. Cry. Let it out. Like, allow yourself to feel that feeling, because then you'll start to understand that feeling a little bit better, right? So, like the girl that went to state, right? She went to state, and like she knows she could have done better. She knows she could have won some matches that she shouldn't have lost, but she wasn't mentally there because it was on the big stage. There's hundreds of people. You're in this giant stadium, right? It's so loud. They have 10 mats on the floor. You're in this giant arena in Bakersfield. It's the only thing anyone's been talking about all year, you know. And then, you know, she's very sad, and you can tell she wants to cry, but she doesn't want to cry because it's like, I can't let people see me this way, you know. And I like stopped her, and I was like, hey, like, I was like, it's okay. Like, you went out there, you did what you could do at that moment. Allow yourself to feel this right now.
That's awesome.
I was like, how do you feel right now? You know, I was like, you don't have to tell me how you feel. Just think about it to yourself. Like, how do you feel right now? Remember this feeling, all right? Remember this feeling. Allow yourself to go home. Feel it for a few days, right? That's okay. Be submerged in that feeling. Because when's the next time you're actually going to really feel this deeply about something, right? So feel it. Now, remember that feeling, right? Remember that feeling. And then that's where I told her, like, restructure your goals now, right? Remember that feeling. Now you have something else to strive for, right? You understand where you're at currently in your life. You understand what it feels like to not achieve the things that you're working for, right? Now you're able to structure in a way that allows you to be like, okay, this is what I did and I didn't achieve my goals. What can I do now in this present moment that will allow me to achieve my goals in the future? So it's like, okay, now let me think, oh, you know, I was goofing off doing this, or like I wasn't really focused during this time frame, or, you know, I allowed the emotions to get the best of me at this point in time during my wrestling season. Why did that happen? Why was I feeling that way coming up to finals and stuff like that, right? So then now you're able to actually deal with that feeling because you felt it before. You felt that stress, you felt the anxiety, right? So now when you get back to that big show, instead of going in there with that flight mode, you're going to go in there with that fight mode of like, okay, like now my goal is coming up. It's time to achieve it, right? So when you get those feelings of self-doubt, right, that overwhelming feeling of like, fuck, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I don't know. That's the moment that the universe is telling you, hey, you've been asking for this. You've been asking for this goal. You've been asking for this moment. I'm putting it in front of you. Now it's time for you to make the choice of whether you really want this, right? Do you deeply want this? Do you value this enough that you want this for your life? And you're going to make the choice. You're going to make the choice of whether like, yeah, I'm going to go after it, or no, I'm going to kind of like step back and just let things play out. So you start to get a little more sense of control in those uncontrollable situations, right? And that's what kind of wrestling teaches you. It's all about allowing yourself to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And you learn from that and you grow from it, and it's just a repeated thing that's going to constantly kind of happen, right? And even still to this day, like, it's hard for me to take a step back and be like, oh, I'm so angry, I'm so like mad, you know what I mean? And you don't think about, you know, why or what you did that allowed you to feel that way. So you take a step back and allow yourself to feel it.
Fuck yeah.
And be like, okay, like, I know this I remember this feeling. I'm not afraid of it anymore. Like, let's move on and keep going.
Right. I was going to ask you that about, you know, the sport is just brutal. You're constantly pushing your limits. You know, it's a combat sport, so there's like risk of injury.
Oh, yeah.
And you've been injured catastrophically skateboarding and wrestling.
Yep.
So now that you are where you are, you're still in your prime, man, 33 years old. What is your relationship with fear now these days? Do you fear less? Are you more fearful?
I feel that I'm still fearful a lot, right? I'm fearful, but I'm able to recognize it a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, like I forget. Like, there are times where I go just to practice jiu-jitsu, and like even just before I even walk to the gym, you're kind of like, man, I'm scared. I don't want to go in here. You know, I'm going to have to work hard. Like, I might get beat up. Like, you know, even if I tell people like, yo, I'm trying to go light today, there's going to be someone in there that's going hard, you know, and it's like, fuck. And you get that feeling of fear and that feeling of doubt, of like doubting yourself. But then you get to the point of like, you know what? I remember that I've been here, and once I went through it, like, I felt better after. Like, whether I succeeded in my task that day or not, like, I still went to it, I still did it, and I'm still here, you know, and I felt better after, whether I got beat up or I beat someone up,
Right.
you know, like, I survived. I made it through. So
Yeah.
then I still get that feeling of fear. I try to tell my kids, I'm like, look, if you don't get that feeling of fear, something's wrong. Like, something's wrong.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you're going to feel that feeling no matter what you do. Speaking in front of people, doing a pod. When I was walking up, that's why I told you, you know, you're like, oh, I'm doing the podcast with John today. I was like, let me walk around the park for a second, like, get my thoughts clear, you know, and just like
I feel you.
allow myself to feel the feeling of like anxiety of going into this too, you know, because it's never going to go away, right? It's part of our nature to, it's what keeps us surviving in the world, right? Because your body doesn't want to like push, it wants the status quo, it wants to just do what's going to get you by and to be comfortable, right? As long as you can do that, then you're going to be fine, you'll survive. But it doesn't want to like push past a bunch of stuff and push past that fear and push past those feelings. But there are situations where you're forced into it. Like if I'm walking down the trail and some big old bear comes through, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That big old feeling comes through and now I'm forced to deal with it, right? If I wasn't forced to deal with it, you would just stay in that little, like, going through life, doing everything kind of like mediocre and getting by. And but that's the stuff that actually allows you to progress and move forward. And I think that's what you kind of learn in wrestling is like, all right, I know that if this feeling is coming on, it's going to lead me in a good direction.
Are you still pushing? Do you still feel like you're pushing limits? Do you instill that to your competitors that, hey, you're going to need to push yourself this practice? Or are you more kind of like save it for the actual competition?
There are moments in time, right? So that as a coach, you've gone through it. So you got to program your practices leading up to competition that allow them to be at their peak performance, right? You don't want to like beat the hell out of kids and then now they got to go compete at their best and now they're all like beaten and battered and mentally they're like, I'm over this. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. That's why a lot of kids quit too, right? So you got to like, the way I'll structure practice is if we have a tournament Saturday, right? Monday, we kind of go over like a little bit of technique stuff that we needed to work on. Not so tough, right? But it's decent. Tuesday, tough as hell. Hard practice, hard drilling, hard conditioning. Like, I want these kids stumbling out of the room like, oh, coach killed us today, right? Wednesday, a little bit tougher still. A little bit tougher, a little bit harder, but then instead of hard conditioning, I'll do stuff where it's like dynamic stretching or they'll stretch and that allows them to heal their body, right? And then Thursday, another hard practice, but not so necessarily so hard physically, but hard mentally that allows them to think and focus and stuff. And then Friday, all fun, dude. All fun. Like, make it lighthearted. Let them drill, goof off. And then Saturday comes around because they need to be able to sleep and go to bed on Friday so that they can wake up in the morning, right? You don't want them to go in bed super stressed out. So, like, I try to structure Friday practices to be somewhat fun. That allows them to go into the weekend of, like, you know what? Wrestling's fun. I'm going to go have fun tomorrow, you know? Like I mentioned for the CCS tournament, right? For a lot of the girls, we had 6 girls compete at the CCS championships, and I could tell they were a little burnt out. They're a little tired. Wednesday, like, I don't know, something was off, you know. And I was planning to have a pretty tough practice. And I look at my other coach. I look at Mickey. You know, he was there, the one that I met in the Uber.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I'm changing practice right now. I was like, we're not going to do what we said we're going to do today. I was like, we're going to play a bunch of games. He's like, all right. Like, some girls are stressed out because 4 of the girls are seniors. This is their last fucking shot, bro. This is their last shot, right? And they're stressing out. I was like, you know what? Let's change it up. I was like, all right, break, go grab some water, go chill. They come back, and I'm like, all right, you ready for the grind? And they all look at me like, fuck, I'm already feeling it, dude. Coach is insane. And I'm like, grab an extra T-shirt. Grab this. So we play this game, right, where you put a T-shirt in the back of your shorts, and you got to run around and steal the kids' T-shirts.
Lizard tag,
stuff like that, right? So we ended up playing like a bunch of games and stuff. Now they're running around, having fun. The stress is gone. They're cool. Goofing off. We may not be doing wrestling stuff, but they're running around getting a workout, right?
Yeah.
So now it's allowing them to amp themselves up towards the last, what potentially is their last tournament of their high school career ever, and be positive about it rather than going into it with a negative mindset.
Yeah,
because it reminds them of why they even started wrestling in the first place, right? Because as a senior, right, you're stressed with the burden of school, you're stressed with going to college, you're becoming an adult, right? They started wrestling and they hung out wrestling as a freshman because they enjoyed it. You're not going to hang around wrestling if you don't enjoy it, trust me. So I was like, let's make it fun for them. So now it like went back to the roots of like, man, this is why I did it. This is fun. You know, I'm here with my friends, you know. And I told them, I was like, look, I don't really remember the competitions. I don't remember, you know, my wins or losses. What I remember is all the fun times I had in the wrestling room with my friends.
That's beautiful. I want to ask you, too, now that you've been in the jiu-jitsu rooms, training rooms for a little bit, what's the comparisons going on in your mind between jiu-jitsu and wrestling?
It's interesting, man. It's very interesting. Like going to my back, which you're not supposed to do in wrestling, was very foreign and very new in jiu-jitsu. But again, like wrestling is about allowing yourself to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to lay on my back. I'm going to let these big guys smother me, and I'm going to try and work to get off a bottom and stuff like that, and like work stuff. And like it was a very hard transition, but now that I'm used to it, it's so fun. It's like now they don't know what I'm going to hit them with, you know, because I could do stuff from everywhere now. And it's like the biggest thing is like how slowed down it is compared to wrestling, right? It's very slow, like, or you can amp it up very, very tough too, right? Depending on who you're with. But like I would do wrestling stuff and very top heavy and pressure, and it would get me in bad situations. And that like, boom, all of a sudden I'm getting Kimura'd, you know, or I'm getting choked out. And I'm like, damn, I'm like, all right, I can't be this full-on go wrestler here because it's going to get me in trouble. Because like they can grab a limb from anywhere and like break my leg, break my ankle, you know. So I was like, this is very interesting. But no one can keep up with me is the thing. Like we'll do like 7 rolls of like 6 minutes, and I'm like, all right, who wants to keep going? Everyone's like, what do you mean, man? I'm done. I need a break.
Right. The endurance
aspect, and it comes down to that mental toughness because they're like, aren't you tired? I'm like, yeah, I'm tired, but I can keep going.
That's what I love about it too. Is I love just endurance, and I never knew that I loved endurance until I had 5 matches in one day.
Oh yeah,
5 jiu-jitsu matches in a stacked division for my age range, but I had 5 matches, and they're all 5-6 minutes,
5 minutes, and then they go back to back, right? Which is very new to wrestling, because wrestling, like you go to a wrestling tournament, you wrestle your match, you're allotted, you can't wrestle, you have to have a 45-minute break before you can wrestle your next match. I did one jiu-jitsu tournament. You go for 5 minutes, you get a break for 5 minutes, you do your next match, you get a break for 5 minutes, you do your next match, and it's like, man, like
the adrenaline dump is no joke.
Yeah.
I remember feeling like, I just want to go to sleep right now. And then you got like 5 minutes with like the next dude. And yeah, you talk about that zone, and it's more of like, fuck, man, you give up, and then you're just doing things automatically.
Yeah.
That's I don't know.
And that's what I've been learning too, like in jiu-jitsu, right? Because you get into a lot of funky positions that I'm not used to from like wrestling, and like I allow myself to be there. I'll try and like, I'll just throw stuff up and then I'll get tapped out, and I'll do this, then I'll get tapped out, and I'll do this and get tapped out. And then like other newer people, they're just like, so they'll hold a position for a very long time and they'll just hold you and squeeze you and squeeze you.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting mad because I'm like, bro, do something. Like, we're just laying here now. Like,
to be able to deal with, like, you mentioned letting yourself get into bad situations. Man, that's good on you. A lot of people never get to that mindset of letting themselves experience vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like, talk about holding. People still do that at blue belt, at purple belt.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm still a blue, but I've been training for a while, and you know, I'm trying to flow from position to position.
Yeah.
And feel what it's like to explore new ideas and have new conversations physically, and and you as a high level wrestler, I mean, to let yourself do that that speaks volumes to who you are, man.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, I love
Yeah.
rolling with the higher belts,
Yeah.
right? Because especially like when I was first in there, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Holy shit!" Like, okay, like I gotta do some stuff to this
Yep,
kid,
yep,
you know?
yep.
Like, I can't just like slack because then he'll catch me.
Yeah, and I've seen some of your matches at white belt too, and I'm like, whoa, I'm glad I'm not going up against a guy like this.
I'm completely different now. Like,
Yeah.
and it's not because I got a blue belt or whatever, right? And even when they gave me my blue belt, I didn't want it, kind of, right? In a sense of like, I understand that you gotta learn, you gotta work through things, you gotta understand. And I was like, I don't want to get a belt just because I'm a high level wrestler, right? I want to get a belt because I know what I'm doing in jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that are collegiate wrestlers that almost automatically get their purple belt just because they're so good at wrestling. And it's like, yeah, I don't want that. I want to earn it. I want to feel like I've worked for this, right? And again, it comes down to that basic stuff of wrestling, of like putting my head down, going through that grit of like, you know, grinding my teeth, doing all those repetitions of the moves and stuff. And that's the bigger thing that I learned too, is when you're drilling for jiu-jitsu, some people goof off and they take a while, and I'm like, come on, bro, let's do some reps. Let's get some reps in. Like, let's get a lot of reps. I want to learn this.
I would love, I mean, nowadays it's a little harder for me because I'm a lot older, but I love just, getting the reps in, training extra rounds until it's like late. Yeah. Or even like, they call it marathon rolling, to where you're rolling for like 20 minutes straight non-stop. Yeah. And I mean, that's fun. We have yet to be to share the mat together, but I'm pretty sure we should. After this, we'll definitely set something up.
Most definitely.
Okay. I saw, and this is crazy because we've had this conversation now, and knowing the type of guy you are, you said, I'm probably mismatching your words or whatever, but what I got out of what you wrote was that you want to put West Coast wrestling on the map as a coach. And I'm like, hell yeah, dude. Lowell High School. I just read about Lowell. There was like a write-up in the New Yorker about it. As far as the education system goes, dude, you're committed as a coach.
I'm committed, right? So, California is known for their wrestlers, right? But it's more so of like Southern California, Central California, right? Around like Northern and like San Francisco, like everyone looks at the San Francisco wrestling section as like a joke, right? And so did I, right? Like in college, I looked at the Lowell, like I've seen the Lowell program. I went to one of their matches before, and I was like, this is a fucking joke. These kids should not be able to go to, it's an easier road to go to state for the SF section than it is for the Southern section. Mm-hmm. So when I was in high school, you had to place at league, you had to place at sections, you had to place at masters, and then you got to go to state. For the SF section, you automatically go to your sections without a league. If it's only the number one person that goes, and then you get to go to state, right? But there's only like 2 or 3 kids in that weight class. Yeah. So it's like they're taking away from these really high level wrestlers that deserve to be at the state tournament. And, but then you get this scrub from San Francisco section that everyone is like, they're just going to lose at their match at the state tournament and be done, right? Mm-hmm. For our girls, it's a little bit different. Our girls actually have to go through the CCS section, the Central Coast section, which is a lot tougher to get to state. But for our boys, it's like this easy road, right? But as coming into it, I was like, you know what? I want to be in a wrestling room. I want to do this. My friend's coaching at Lowell. I'll coach at Lowell. Mm-hmm. And after seeing it, Coach Cruz, that was the head coach when I had started, he was developing the program. We didn't care about the section. We cared about state. So we were training our kids to compete at the state level. Mm-hmm. So we would just destroy kids in our section because we were like, look, we're trying to get our kids to be high caliber wrestlers. We don't want the San Francisco section to just be this joke anymore. So, unfortunately, Coach Cruz's mother passed away due to COVID, right? He had to move away. So this past year, I took over as a head coach. Mm-hmm. And it was my first year as head coach. It was my first year of structuring the program. And I got to know a lot of the the other coaches from the other schools a lot more now, right? And we all sat down and we're like, look, it's time to change this. It's time to like get some respect here, right? Even our own district, San Francisco, they don't really care about the sports. They don't care about wrestling. My wrestling room is this classroom where we have to take all of the desks out. There's this fake wall that we have to break down. We have to set up all the mats, roll out the mats, mop the mats, have our practice, take all that down, put all the desks away, put the wall away. Takes away a lot of our like weightlifting and conditioning training away from us, right? And that's how they look at sports here, right? Because like all these kids have other opportunities in San Francisco. And with the other high schools, we're like, it's time to change. So we've been working together. We've been showing each other how to wrestle, right? I teach a class on Fridays, and the coaches come to my class. So
Dope.
I don't care if they know the moves we know. I don't care if they know how we wrestle. I want them to know how we wrestle. Because if we're able to make the other schools better at wrestling, our programs will get better, and then we'll start to earn that respect, right, from the other sections when we do go to state, right? Finally, like all these other schools at state are like, Lowell, oh, we've heard of Lowell. Lowell's in San Francisco, right? Like our name's starting to get out there just because we're getting kids winning matches at state, right? They expect us to go lose, and all of a sudden we're winning matches at state. And they're like, whoa, like, okay, like they kind of got to be doing something there, right? So I feel like I was meant to come here and coach in this city, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't meant to go to some already well-known high school that has great wrestling. And that's what a lot of coaches do because they want to coach successful wrestlers, right? Nah, I want to be like the Bad News Bears, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you come out of the woodwork, I'm like, damn, where'd these kids come from? So I have this whole idea of like trying to help all the other high schools in San Francisco to allow them to build better programs, right? So that's why I help teach them. I teach them my knowledge, right? As this high level collegiate wrestler, like I don't care. Like, know all of our moves. Let's get better.
Yeah.
Let's get better as a city.
Yeah. And that's the way you can only get better is the level of competition steps up.
Exactly.
Wow. Wow. And how do you feel that the steps that have been taken are playing out so far? Do you feel like you're on that road to putting it on the map? Yeah.
So we were, right? We in 2020, right before the pandemic happened, I had 35 kids on the team, and we were the all-city champions. You know what I mean? We had a kid go to state. He won a match against really high-level kids. There is this kid, Jaden Abbas, that wrestles for Stanford College now, right?
Yeah.
He got to wrestle him, and everyone just thought, oh, Jaden's going to whoop this San Francisco kid's ass, right? My kid took it to him.
Wow.
And they were wrestling tough, and he couldn't pin him, couldn't get high points on him, wrestled the entire match. It was a low-scoring match, right? Went the whole distance, and everyone was like, how did that San Francisco kid survive against this really high-level wrestler? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he's wrestling for Stanford. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and so that was kind of like the eye-opener of like, okay, what we are teaching these kids here is doing well. It's gonna do well. But then COVID hit and our numbers dropped drastically. Like I had 16 kids on our team this past year, but now it's starting to build up because even after wrestling season, I had a lot of kids coming out and asking about it. But I feel like now that I had become the head coach, it's allowing me to have a clean slate to build the program and to build it up the way I see it, right? And have these kids wrestling the way I know that they should be wrestling in order to compete at a high level. And I feel like it was timing. It was perfect, right? And again, like we mentioned, like things kind of fall into place as long as you just keep moving your feet, have a goal, and even if you don't end up there, something will pop up and it'll allow you to keep moving forward.
Wow.
So hopefully,
I'm excited.
We'll see how it goes. I'm excited to see where I can take this program, and the biggest thing for me is that I'm not afraid to learn from other coaches. I'm not afraid to let them know that, like, I don't need a big ego and be like, I'm the best coach. You know what I mean? I'm like, hey, teach me what you know. Like, let me learn from you. You know what I mean? I don't care about thinking I'm like this best coach or whatever, right? Because everyone has a different coaching style. You can learn something from anyone, right?
I truly hope you keep that mindset. I mean, I love it. I think that's the only way jiu-jitsu's gotten better.
Yeah.
As in my whole time that I've been studying the sport, because people spread ideas, people are willing to share ideas. Same thing with DJing, same thing with breaking, and
Yep.
in even the way technology is set up for us now is that everybody has a way to show something. Like, hey, I know this. Let me show you how to do it. And whether or not you want to charge money for it, whatever, that's your prerogative. But people are still going to learn, and there's never been a better time to learn and close the gap of the learning curve. Yeah, the learning curve is becoming shorter now.
It is.
I mean, attention spans are shorter, but I mean, that means they're just taking in more information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have like new moves that are popping up and new styles and stuff like that, you know, you can go on YouTube and watch it.
Do you see wrestling still evolving?
Oh yeah, definitely. Wrestling has. If you take a look at how wrestling used to be, even just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, up until now, right? Like the level of competitiveness and the way that people are putting moves together is like, it's crazy, you know, stuff that you would have never thought of. That's why they call it like funk wrestling. Scrambling, you know, it's all about chain wrestling, linking moves together. And there's so many different moves out there, and there's so many different possibilities of putting things together that it's almost like endless. It's just about how creative you are and how you're able to put it together. Wow. Right? And where that comes from is learning and training with other people. So I train jiu-jitsu at Fight Culture, right, which is in Daly City, California. And they're about the culture. They don't care about making money. They don't care about being this big gym. They care about teaching you and allowing you to learn. And a big thing they tell us a lot, they're like, hey, go train at other gyms, go learn from other people, because that's the only way you're going to get better. If you train with the same people all the time, you have the same workout partners all the time, yeah, you may get better, you'll get better together, right? But it's not like you're going to learn something new. You know, you already know what each other are doing, you already know the moves you're doing. The way you're going to learn is by going somewhere else, getting out of your comfort zone, go to a new gym, learn from them, see what they're doing, right? And allowing yourself to be open to learn. And that's what it's all about, is seeking out knowledge, allowing yourself to just be a learner, right? Soak it all in. Because of this conversation, I started opening my mind up to learning about wrestling. I started listening to what the history of wrestling is and studying that. And I'm glad I did, because it opened up this whole tradition. I mean, I always knew that it was a tradition very heavily in Iowa, right? Yeah, the Midwest is huge. But somebody made the connection of us now and people still practicing wrestling going back to the early Romans, maybe even before that, to prehistoric times, to where it was on cave drawings, people wrestling. And the fact that this tradition has carried on since the beginning of time to the early humans, that just makes me nerd out even more, you know what I mean? And even talking to you about it, and you've actually immersed yourself in the life, it's just nothing but respect, man, for this culture of wrestling and grappling and the just and it's still pretty niche, you know? It's still kind of like still like in little pockets here and there, and still where it's hard to get, you know, because when you don't understand something, it's hard to accept it, right? Especially with like parents and that have never seen wrestling before, and now their kids are getting into wrestling, and like that girl that I was talking about that went to state, right? Her mom has no idea about wrestling, understands it, right? And she was like, yeah, it took a little bit of getting used to when I see my girl over here getting all twisted up and all this crazy stuff, you know, and being in these weird positions, you know, because it looks weird, it looks funny. They wear singlets, like these little leotard-looking things, you know, and it's like basically naked, and you're just like, this is very foreign and very, very weird, right? So it's hard to accept something that you don't understand. So they're kind of changing the outfits now. You wear shorts and t-shirts and stuff like that. But and the biggest thing too is that women's wrestling and girls high school wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the entire nation right now. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Like you mentioned, Iowa just started their women's program.
University. Iowa University. Oh, wow.
So And all these big name schools are starting to pop up with their Division I women's wrestling programs and
Very
stuff
cool.
like that, just because they're realizing, like, look, you know, there's something here, and these women can wrestle. The reason why it's a little different than the men's wrestling is because it looks different, right? And they have to do moves a little bit differently because of how their bodies work. So you don't quite, like, they don't, again, it's something you don't understand. But now that they're accepting and allowing themselves to be like, hey, let me learn about this, now they're like, okay, like, these women, these girls, they can wrestle.
Hell yeah, man. Well, I think we could go another 3 more hours. Yeah, we've gone 3 hours, dude.
Damn, that's crazy.
All right, last thing.
Yeah.
I just want to be respectful of your time, and man, thank you so much for sharing.
I'm chilling all day. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Teaching wrestling class later tonight at 6:30.
Love it.
That's all I got really going on today.
And I just think ever since I started jiu-jitsu, I met guys, you know, that we know, you know, familiar, same names. And it's just kind of all about designing the life that you really want to live. You may not have the high status stuff, but hey, as long as you're getting to do like jiu-jitsu or, like in your case, wrestle or teach, coach, what more can you ask for? That's like success in itself already.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I know a lot of people, since we're in San Francisco, man, have never bombed a hill in San Francisco. So if you could just describe that, like what it's like to take your skateboard and just look down the lip of the hill that you're about to bomb, and just describe that to people that have always probably wanted to know what that feeling was like, what it looks like, what you're thinking while you're going. I mean, just, it's the Mecca, right? Like, San Francisco's the Mecca, dude.
that was one of the reasons, because, like, I skated heavily, right? And, like, I remember my first time skating around San Francisco, I was taking videos and sending it to my brother everywhere, and I'm like, dude, this is where this went down, this is where this went down, like, check this out, like, I can't believe I'm freaking skating here, dude, you know what I mean? Like, this is the place to be. And, like, I would skate all over San Francisco, and, like, I came from a town that didn't really have a lot of hills, so getting used to the hills is scary, because you step on your board and, like, 2 feet down the hill, you're already going fast, you know, you're flying, and you get to a point to where it's full go. There's no turning back. It's full commit. So if you're at the top of the hill, right, and you're looking down, you kind of size it up, and there you get this feeling in this knot in your stomach of like, all right, I know that if I put my feet on this board, there's no stepping off of it. It's like I'm going to be going anywhere from like 25 to 35 miles an hour down this hill. If I fall, I'm falling. If I put my foot down, I'm probably going to fall. It's like, so you have to be willing to allow yourself to accept the entire risk of what's going to happen. Like, it's life or death. Like, people die doing this stuff a lot, especially in San Francisco, right? So at that Dolores Hill bomb where I got injured, there was actually a kid that passed away because he fell and he hit his head and he went to the hospital, ended up passing away, right? So you got to realize, too, like, if you're doing it, you got to fully commit. And yes, it's going to be scary, but again, you got to accept that fear and go for it. So as soon as you step on that board and you start going down, right, you can hear your wheels like spinning, the ball bearings spinning, your feet are on the grip tape, you can feel every little rock and crevice going down, your feet are shaking, you're kind of, even though you have grip, you're kind of slipping and sliding going down. And as you're going down, right, you're kind of put your eyes on a focal point down the bottom of the hill. You're not looking down on the board, you're not looking left or right, all you're looking at is straight forward, like what's in front of you at this present moment, and that is it. Everything else is flying past you in a huge blur, right? Your eyes are tearing up. You can barely see. You're trying to focus on going straight. You're holding your breath for the most part. You're clenching your feet, right? You're gripping. You're squeezing like every muscle in your body to try and be as still and as balanced as possible, right? and to allow yourself to be fully immersed in that, knowing that where you are headed is that point right there at the bottom of the hill. So you don't see anything else besides that point that's right there at the very bottom. You see your end goal, right? You see your end goal. You fully commit to holding your ground, holding your balance, only focusing on that present moment, that present objective, that only thing you're trying to do is get down that hill. So you fly down, you just zoom down, and as you're going down, you get this weightlessness. You hit your top speed, and you get to a point to where it almost feels effortless, where it's like, yes, you're like clenching, you're holding, you're gripping as you're going down, but even though you're going so fast, it all slows down, and it's super slow, and you're actually able to think and process everything while it's going that fast, right? And as you get to the bottom and you hit the little lip, right? That's probably the scariest part. Like I talked about how like when life says it's going to give you that feeling of anxiousness and doubt right when you're at the brink of your goal, and it's whether you decide to move forward or to step away from it, right? So when you get to the bottom of that hill and it launches you forward on that flat part of the street, that's where your board starts to get a little out of control and loose. But if you stay focused on your focal point forward, you hold your ground, you keep your balance, you will end up and reach that goal. And you'll stand up, the overwhelming feeling of joy and happiness and lightness in your body, you feel like you've conquered the world.
Wow, that's awesome. And especially at Dolores Park.
Yeah.
People are there to greet you like, wow. I remember seeing that video. You showed up to work for the first time and you were like, hey, check this out. I was like, that's you.
Yeah.
That's fucking...
Yeah. And that was when the cops blocked off the street, so everyone was going down the freaking sidewalk, so it was even more narrow, so you had no room to carve or power slide. It was just go straight.
Wow. What a beautiful moment. What a beautiful moment. That's amazing. I always look at those kids that do it, and I'm just like, wow, look at that. That's just absolute freedom, man.
But again, that comes with practice and repetition and them doing smaller hills before they do the big one.
But, I mean, that's commitment. It just sounds like. I mean, call yourself a skater. You show up to San Francisco, and, like, how can you call yourself a skater if you show up to San Francisco not bombing a hill? That's at least that's what I've heard.
Yep. I've had a lot of friends move out here just because of that, because of the feeling that they get for going down the hill.
Yeah. Wow. Man, Martin, thank you so much, dude.
Of course.
This has been a fucking really great experience living your expressing these ideas. I'm just like, wow, this is so cool, man. I hope we can do this again sometime, man.
Most definitely.
Anything else? Anything else that you want to put out there before we leave it to the interwebs to suss out everything?
If I guess if I had any last thing to say, is take some time, find out what you truly value in your life. Like it's hard to find that, right? Most people think like, what do I need to do with my life to be successful? But it's like, no, what do you value in life? Figure that out, and then just choose a direction to go to and fully commit to it. Just go full go. Allow yourself to be submerged in whatever it is you're doing, and you'll wind up in a better place.
I wanted to ask before I stop this too. Are you still vegan and alcohol free?
So I am vegan. I was alcohol free for a little while.
Okay.
And then I'll drink occasionally, but then I kind of stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as of today, I've been pretty sober, just because if you, like I'm saying, like find out what you value and go after it, right? So I applied for the Fight to Win in April, and I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do that, like, I'm doing it. So being as healthy as I can, not drinking, working out, getting in shape, getting my mind prepared. Because if they choose me, you know what I mean, I'm going to be on that big stage competing. So
Yeah. So you applied for the Fight to Win in April.
Yes.
In Sacramento.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. I hope you get out there, man.
I hope so too. If not, then I'll be at the next.
I will
tournament or
definitely be
something,
there to support for sure in person. Hell yeah, dude. Wish you the best, Martin.
Thank you.
You've always been a good dude. I always expected a great conversation with anybody that I sit with, but this has been surpassed tenfold.
John, you've been amazing, and I'm glad we got to reconnect. You know what I mean? It's been a pleasure. It's been a huge pleasure of mine to sit here with you.
Thanks, Martin. This episode features the guitar playing of Catherine DeLafcaron, recorded on a camping trip right by the fire in the Grand Canyon. Thanks everybody for listening. Please like, review, or subscribe to this and other episodes on the platforms you're listening on. I'll be posting 10-minute snippets of this and past conversations on YouTube and Instagram for those constrained with time. A free way to support this podcast is to share this with somebody that you might think might like conversations like this and past conversations. Please check out the show notes on the QuakeCityPortal.com, as well as videos that I'll be working on in the near future. So stay tuned for that to be posted up on our YouTube channel. And as always, thank you, everybody, for listening and all of your kind feedback and the kind words over these past 6 months of doing this podcast. And with that, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be peaceful, may you be loved. Thank you for listening. See you down the road.